issues that we come to talk or share with you. They're real, they're with us every day, and there are people who are acknowledging in what I'm saying now who've been very courageous, very aligned with their Christos, and very committed to the work. And for that reason, which we know you all share in common, our welcome this evening is especially warm and contains substantial amount of congratulations for sticking to what you know to be true. And with no further ado, I shall introduce my other half.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll get to be amusing once you're warmed up.
Thank you, love. Okay. Right. Hello, everybody. Thank you very, very much for coming. My heart was broken when we found that about a dozen people that were at the Cathara workshop decided that Archangel Michael didn't want them to go and such, so they're not here with us this evening, and we send them great love and blessings and salute their Christos and hope that it will reach them in a way most appropriate for them. There's a great love that's extended to people of all walks of life and all belief systems. In the belief system we represent, it's inclusive rather than exclusive. But part of the things that we teach are identification of who's who and what's what. And that gets us into trouble all the time. Because sometimes on the path of spiritual growth, there are things that aren't fluffy and light and sweet. Sometimes there are things that are very serious and that aren't pleasant. And especially on Earth for the last 25,000 years, we've had a lot of that happening. In the course that you're about to take, the Templar course, we're going to explore Master's Planetary Grid Mechanics. This is a Master's course, as I believe by the time you get finished with the course, you will understand why. It is a course that's going to cover a wide spectrum of information. We're going to start in a place which was kind of funny, because the place that we're going to start tonight, what we're going to move into tonight, has to do with a part of the Cathara course that is in the reading, but we tend to not cover so we can get to the other more important things on anatomy in the Cathara course. But one of the comments that was made by the group of people who decided not to show up was, where's the love? And it's really funny, because if they'd asked me it directly, I could say, well, on page, so-and-so. Because there is, in the Cathara manual, and we put it in this manual as well, a brief discussion on what's called the postures of love, from soft love to tough love to self-love to other love, and to something called omni-love, which is Christos love. Sometimes soft love is appropriate, and that's the kind most people really, really like. It's the kind you can see most fully embodied in the, let's say, mother-child relationship, or a normal, healthy mother-child relationship. The nurturing, soft, cuddly, gentle, comforting kind of love. That works well with some people, and that's the kind of love that most of us would like to be able to receive and give. But sometimes we deal with people or beings that if you use soft love, they will run over you like a freight train, and they will take everything from you and not have any bit of remorse. And it's not because they're evil or bad or anything like that, but it's because there's a level of spiritual maturity that is lacking, where the truth of loving under what's called the law of one isn't understood, and therefore they still operate in a way that will create harm to others in order to take for themselves. Now, what has happened with the situation with the people who didn't come is a classic demonstration. It was a perfect demonstration of some of the things that we have taught, where I get accused of, well, where's the love in your teachings? It's all technology. It's spiritual technology. The core of this technology is something called a state of vibrational harmonization, which is the emotional experience that we call love. As we evolve into Christos beings, we progressively become able to love, to experience more love with everything around us, first within ourselves, then within our collectives of people, then with the plants and the animals and the whole planet itself, then with the galaxies and the universe. That's what it means to become a Christ-conscious being. Just because you love someone doesn't mean you have to be stupid. It doesn't mean you have to take the role of playing a victim. We'll explore the differences between soft love a little bit and tough love, because tough love is something that if we're going to really be vessels of healing on a planetary level, it's going to be something we need to learn. Because right now we're in a situation, we are in the middle of a huge, huge mass drama right now, that whether or not we want to be a part of it, we still are, unless somebody has like shuttle tickets to the moon or something that's going to get you out of here. Because there is something called race karma and planetary karma that is coming to the fore right now. It has to do with the Atlantean period. Atlantis was much more than a legend. It was a place in history and a place in time. Through this workshop, we're going to explore Atlantis, we're going to explore Lemuria, we're going to explore things that came before that. This is history, so there's a history lesson within this course. Because if you do not understand the history, which as we talked about in Cathara, time is simultaneous, it means the history is still happening now in its own time vector. If we don't understand the history, we're not going to understand what's happening in the contemporary drama on the planetary level. We're not going to understand who's who in the contemporary drama. We're not going to understand why the New Age movement right now is being ripped apart at the seams. And this is very sad because it wasn't intended to do that. Right now, there are two forces working within the New Age movement. One is a Christos program that has to do with personal healing and planetary healing. And there is another that is an anti-Christos program, which means it is going out of its way to ensure that the planetary divine blueprint does not anchor here, because certain groups of individual beings and collectives have a vested interest in making sure the planetary divine blueprint does not get anchored. For those of you who were not part of the Cathara class, I don't know how many of you were there and how many weren't, but when I talk about divine blueprint, we're talking about something substantial and real in tangible terms in relation to planetary mechanics. So there will be a section in this course where we get directly into planetary mechanics. Here you're going to find out about stargates. You're going to find out about the Templar, the planetary Templar complex. In Cathara level 1, we found out about the internal Templar complex. Well, the internal Templar complex is a direct reflection, a microcosmic reflection of the larger planetary Templar complex. Here we're going to learn about the Templar complex. We're going to learn about stargates. We're going to learn about what they are, what they look like, how they operate. We're going to learn about a very special book that has been missing for about 2,000 years. It was called the Book of Maps and Keys. It was a book that was originally translated by a person named Jeshua Melchizedek. He is the person that became known as Jesus Christ in the biblical stories. The Book of Maps and Keys was a part of a set of books called the 6 Books of Process that told about the personal Templar and internal mechanics that we teach in Cathara, but it also taught about the planetary and galactic and universal levels. It taught about stargates, and it had the maps for the stargates. And if you do not understand Cathara, the core template mechanics and structure, you will not know where stargates are located or how to move from one to another to another. We're going to begin the introduction in this course of the material that was contained within the Book of Maps and Keys, which will show us where stargates are on the planet. You will learn in this course where the 12 primary stargates are located, geographical locations. You will learn about a place called Inner Earth and what that means. It doesn't mean you drill down and you find it. You just come out the other side if you do that. It has to do with angular rotation of particle spin to understand Inner Earth. And you will understand a bit about parallel Earth and how these systems work together. You'll begin to understand something about a very huge secret that's been kept from this race since the Atlantean period. It's called the Secrets of Amente. The Secrets of Amente refer to the halls of Amente. The halls of Amente are part of the planetary, galactic, and universal Stargate system. They are Earth's part of that Stargate system. The halls of Amente have been a buried secret since Atlantean times because there were certain forces that got control of this planet in Atlantis that had a very vested interest in gaining control over the halls of Amente stargates. Because of that, Earth has been a target. Now, the halls of Amente stargates are very interesting because in spiritual tradition, you could translate the science of stargates into the science of ascension passages, because the process of spiritual and physical ascension takes place through the universal, planetary universal, and cosmic stargates. That's how you get out of density. That's how you go home to God. That's how we got in here in the first place. So we're going to learn in this course about the stargates, about their structure, most importantly about their locations. We're going to learn the locations on a planetary level, also on a galactic level and universal level. There'll be a period in through here that we learn about excuse me, a model of creation called the stair-step creation model. It is the model of creation that was used to set all of this in motion, to set our hologram of three-dimensional reality in motion. So we will learn the structure of how we got here. And we will learn more than that. We will learn the race lineage from which the human race came, from the top all the way down, from the point where Source or God individuated itself into the consciousness that eventually became human consciousness here. There's a direct genetic progression that has to do with the templates of consciousness that were first adopted from our multiple levels of selves that we spoke about in Kathara. We will learn about something called the Brenau Rishi races, the Christos founders races. The founders races are a very special group of beings that live in the higher densities, which means they're in the higher dimensional fields of dimension 13, 14, and 15, dimension 10, 11, and 12. And beyond that, there are a group of beings, you could call it your cosmic family, that are called the Yanis, which means of the Unisai. The Unisai is the ancient word that was always used to refer to Source or God, or the one source of all creation. And you can use the word God, you can use the word Unisai, or, Muslims use Allah, whatever you want to use. But, sorry, we're going to talk about this, not only how we come from Source into individuation, but what levels of family we pass through, because each of us has a part of ourselves that are incarnate within different time vectors that have to do with the founders' races, with the Ascended Masters Yanis races. We each have a part of ourselves stationed there. Now, the teachings that are brought out in this Templar course were given at this time a little prematurely, but because if they were not given, there would not be a time when they could be. The teachings that are in this manual weren't really scheduled for till about 2006, if things were going well with the planetary grids. Things are not going well with the planetary grids, and because of that, by 2008, the biblical prophecies of Revelation would begin to have fulfilled themselves, and at that point, that could not have been prevented nor stopped. Now, we're going to talk about in this course about what's immediately in front of us. The people in this course, I'm sure that when you decided to take the course, you knew it was for planetary healing, not just personal, but planetary. Grid workers, light workers, want to get in there and help the planet heal. Well, boy, are you going to get a chance. The first part of healing is understanding what's out of alignment, what needs to be healed. If you don't understand where the problem is, you're not going to understand what to do with it to get it back to its original divine blueprint of health. On the planetary level, what's wrong with it is much more complicated than what the solutions are to fix it. But if you don't understand what's wrong with it is, you're not going to appreciate the significance or the simplicity of the things we can do to heal this planet. The healing of this planet takes a lot more than wishing good thoughts and going around to sacred sites and doing sacred ceremonies. If you're doing sacred ceremonies, but you are not running D12 frequency because you don't know how to activate your Maharic seal, you will not be able to assist in the healing of this planet. But you will be able to assist in using your energies, running in a reverse mathematical program that is not natural. You will be able to assist the forces here that are attempting to create pole shift. Now, one of the objectives of what we like to refer to as the fallen angelic legions is to create physical pole shift here, as they have done in the past. This was foretold in the story, or what's left of the story of Revelations in the Bible, because it was known since 22,326 BC that the next point in time when the stargates would open was scheduled for between the year 2000 and 2017. Stargates open on a natural cycle. I believe it's 26,556 years. They can't open in between that period. This is the next stellar activation cycle, as it's called, Stargate opening cycle. Since the Atlantean period, there have been plans by various collectives in the higher dimensional fields to have a final conflict drama. This was recorded in Revelations, but Revelations was much, much larger before it was ripped apart through the Council of Nicaea and various things that came before the Council of Nicaea. We're in a unique position in the evolution of this planet, because there is a huge history that has led to this point in linear time, which means there's a huge amount of other life fields that are part of the simultaneous time, that are connected to what we're doing now. We have an opportunity to create a healing on this planet now that literally our races, the human races and the founders' races, have waited millions of years to create. What's going to be interesting as we get into understanding stargates and things like that, understanding the structure, then begin to understand the history. It's going to bring us right up into the present moment time and what in the world has taken place on this planet. We are going to get into a bit of information toward the end that has to do with what happened in the United States with the Trade Center, the World Trade Centers getting hit by terrorist airplanes in the Pentagon. This is called a trigger event, and it was part of a large program. It was the kickoff, like first finale, not finale, it was the first kind of introduction to a series of events that have been planned since, let's see, 9,560 BC, have been orchestrated ever since then, step by step by step, and are now going into their fulfillment stage. These plans are not Christos plans. These plans are not set by the founders, they're not set by guardian races, they're not set by genuine angelics, and they weren't set by humans. These plans were set by fallen angelics. In the year 22,326 BC, we're going to cover some of the events that took place there. But a major event took place that has everything to do with what we're in the middle of now. That was the last time a stellar activation cycle, Stargate opening cycle, had begun on Earth. And there was an invasion that took place, literally. Spaceships flying around in the sky, because, see, fallen angelic races do not have the ability to fully build a Merkaba vehicle. So many of them have to use physical mechanical technologies like ships. Well, this place was invaded then. And if it was not for the founders intervening and literally closing the stargates, which you're not supposed to do, once the stargate cycle starts, if you close those stargates, it sends the place into pole shift. But if the stargates were not closed as they began to open in 22,326 BC, none of us would be here at this point. Pole shift was a small consequence then compared to what would have happened if that did not take place. The founders' races closed the stargates as they begin to open because the Anunnaki races of Nibiru, planet Nibiru that we'll talk about, made a massive invasion of the planet, literally, spaceships, the whole bit. They were coming in, not only to take control of the planet, which they'd done before, but they were coming in to use those opening stargates to go directly in to the halls of Amenti, which are not just the stargates that are a part of Earth's body. They connect Earth's body through the 15-dimensional system in this time matrix. If a fallen angelic collective gets control of the halls of Amenti stargates, this entire 15-dimensional time matrix will end up eventually imploding upon itself, because of the way they misuse the natural life force currents that run through a normal time matrix structure. So there was a stalemate that was created in 22,326 BC. The founders' races and the human races and the indigo children races that were on planet at that time had come to finish something that they'd started a long time ago. They'd come then to finish the Christos realignment mission, which was healing the damage to Earth's template by restoring the frequencies of the divine blueprint. This would have at that time closed off Earth's stargates to the fallen angelics, so they could not enter Earth to interfere anymore. So that's what the founders were attempting to do in 22,326 BC. That's why the fallen angelic races, the particular group of the Anunnaki races, decided they weren't going to let that happen. What they wanted to do is come in, create pole shift, and then take over the halls of Amenti stargates, because the Amenti stargates lead directly to a place called Inner Earth. Inner Earth stargates lead directly up the 15-dimensional scale. So it was not just going to be Earth that was going to be taken over. It was Inner Earth, Parallel Earth, Terra, Inner Terra, Parallel Terra, which is density 2 Earth, Gaia, Parallel Gaia, Inner Gaia, density 3 Earth. And they were going to go for the divine blueprint level in the pre-matter densities, where they were going to literally recreate an event that took place 250 billion years ago, before humans were even created, before Anunnaki were even created. An event that was so awful It has come down in history as the original sin, because it's a sin that marked everything in this time matrix since that time. As we go through the Templar course, we're going to learn the history of what's taken place here. And in that history, we're going to run into some familiar names. We're going to run into names like Thoth and Enoch. We're going to run into names like Archangel Michael. And we're going to find out who they are. This is why I wish the people who decided they didn't want to hear what we had to say, because we had made a few comments in Cathara that you don't need the Archangel Michael matrix to, control things for you, and you're better off without that. We don't make those comments lightly, and we're not trying to create a division between light workers. But if those light workers had any clue as to the history of this planet and this galaxy and to who those collectives really are, they would think twice before surrendering their power to them, before allowing them to enter their bodies and their DNA templates to channel them. Those people will find their way eventually to whatever is their path. What we're going to do, we're entering a path of awareness. It is based completely and totally on love. There's no greater love than the love of founders' races, Christos founders' races, who have loved the beings in this time matrix so much that for the last 250 billion years in linear time calculation, they have imprisoned themselves in this matrix until they could heal this matrix. There was a commitment made by the Christos founders' races, and they're the races that each one of us has a part of. We have a part of ourselves that are stationed as one of those members of one of those races. There was a commitment of love that was the deepest kind of love that meant no matter how much I suffer, no matter how much it's not the way I want it to be right now, I know the potential for healing is here, and I will not give up until that is accomplished. There is a love that is so great that it's funny, because the people who have said, where is the love in your teachings? I've heard that before. That's why it made me laugh this time. Oh, here we go again. It's like they're a broken record. It doesn't matter where they live. If they're in the States or up here or, in Antarctica, it doesn't matter. People working with certain matrices of consciousness, certain fallen angelic matrices, like to use that, where's the love comment. And you know what? To them, it's real. Because when I come into a room, or when Az comes into a room, we carry with us a level of love that can go into a little laser beam and love each one of you personally, but it also can expand out into huge bubbles of love that are just a consciousness field. And we feel it deeply. Now, why would someone say to us, we can't feel any love in your teachings? Why might that be? Is it the teachings that lack the love? Or is it the frequency of Christos love, which comes in on D12 and higher and all the way down on the 12 subharmonics of each dimension? Which love? Is it that there's no love here, or that the people who do not have the 12th subharmonic in their DNA activated because they have something blocking that activation cannot feel it? That's what's taking place here. I want you to know as we start that there is a huge amount of love behind these teachings. So much love that I had to learn tough love, because I was always a softie. Boy, as soon as the books came out, the Voyagers books, boy, did I learn quick. I learned tough love really fast, because as soon as I got into the arena, I didn't want to do workshops and lecture to begin with. It is just really, I'm quite a shy person, actually. Not shy and uncomfortable, just I'm an introvert. Well, I was forced to become an extrovert in order to communicate the information to people, and I knew it was valuable. But I was getting attacked left, right, and sideways by people in my face that were representatives of collectives working with certain New Age material that I didn't even know were taking a stand against us at the time. And I was like, why are they being so mean? I was like, my God, I thought we're all on the same team here. And they're like, where's that love? And they're like really mean about it. It's like, good question, where is it? So at this point, I've learned enough tough love where I can stand up to that. And stand up to that and say, I'm sorry you're having a problem if you're having a problem with me or my teachings, but I know what they are and I know the truth for me. You don't have to accept that. I respect that. Can you be nice? I can be nice. You don't have to agree with me, but I can still be nice. One of the things that the love that I speak of is built upon is called the law of one. The law of one is the foundation of all of the Christos teachings. It is the foundation of cognition expressed in words but expressed also in emotion and in creation, that tells us of our indelible connection to Source, in our indelible, uncompromising value and blessedness as units of the consciousness of God, because each one of us are a face of God. That applies to ants too. It applies to fallen angelics as well. The fallen angelics are those who have literally lost memory of their connection to Source, and they see things in terms of me versus them, and they take stands that are not co-creative and cooperative. They instead attempt to compete for energy because they feel their energy is lacking, because they feel cut off from Source. When we talk about the law of one, there are certain things that it is and certain things that it's not. There are certain things that it condones and other things that it doesn't condone, but it allows. Part of the law of one has to do with the nature of God or Source. And there is an attribute of God and Source that is called allowance. Allowance that will allow beings in the time matrix to make decisions that are actually against the will of God. It was part of the gift of free will. This was a free will time matrix that was created. From the beginning, that was Source's intention. If Source God had imposed its will, saying, and it has to be this way, that would have taken the free will element out. Free will becomes a funny thing at a certain level, because at a certain level of integration of your own higher levels of identity, you just never think of doing anything other than what the will of Source is, because that's where the harmony is, and that's where your clearest flow is. That's when you know yourself as a walking embodiment of Source. But free will was an experiment of sorts that God wanted to experience within itself. And free will, when it's used in respect for and in cooperation with the divine blueprint or the original will and intention of Source, is a beautiful thing. And amazing probabilities of things you'd never know could be created. That's why Source adopted it. That's why Source wanted to experience itself in the hologram of time with unlimited potential of what it might do with itself there once it became individuated. We'll talk about, in the history that we'll go through, we'll talk about way back when, and I don't just mean when life came here on this planet, but way back when this whole mess started 250 billion years ago, with something called the Lyran Elohim Wars. We'll find out who the Elohim are, we'll find out who the Seraphim are, and we'll find out about a group called the Brahmarama that not too many people know about. The Elohim and the Seraphim, you hear those names bantered about a bit in certain spiritual texts, and there used to be references to them heavily in the Bible, but those texts were taken out, most of them. You'll find out about a group called the Nephilim, who were not Christos founders' races. By the end of this, you're going to see a picture, the big picture of what's going on here. And there are elements of it that could be darn right scary if you didn't know how to connect to your own avatar Christos level. Because once you integrate your Christos, or even begin the processes of doing that, and learn the mechanics of bringing those frequencies into your body, you can go where angels and archangels fear to tread. Because you can't be harmed by things that appear to be in the negative polarity here. Until that point, until a person realizes that they have their own divine blueprint and their own Christos level, until they begin to take measures within their body to open their bodies again to receive the current that goes with the Christos level, which is D12 frequency, D12 and higher. It creates a pillar of frequency in your biofields running through your body and around it, that you can walk through anything and be a force of healing and harmonization of everything. But until that point, you have a partial pillar of light that emerges through your DNA, actually, through your body and around your body. But it depends on how far that pillar goes, that pillar called the Antankarana, which is the smaller pillar. It's not the Christos pillar. That pillar can be compromised. From the fallen angelic levels, the fallen angelics exist from dimension 11.5 and down. Some people think that, D4 is the trouble spot, the astral plane, and everything beyond that is higher and better and perfect. It isn't. And this is one of the games that's being run right now in the New Age movement, where people are just so glad that something is talking to them out there, through there. They're not asking who it is. They're accepting stuff like, I'm an ascended master from dimension 5. That's not an ascended master. You know? They're accepting, I am angel this or archangel that, without having any clue as to who the being is, or even thinking that that being might have an ill intention. Why? Because the being's obviously higher than me, so therefore it's better. Therefore it's more Christed than I am. And that's an absolute falsehood. When you get to D12, that's when you can trust what you talk to. That's what I tell people. If they're channeling, first of all, don't channel. Communicate telepathically. You can talk to anything just as well. And aim high. Don't talk to the confused guys in the middle dimensional fields. Talk to beings D12 and higher, starting with your own self that's there. So there's a lot of things we're going to learn in this workshop, but the most important thing is the solution. We're going to learn the problems, we're going to learn the history through which the problems came to be. We're going to learn why the Trade Center thing happened and why it's a trigger event. We're going to learn about some of the things that it's going to lead to if certain things aren't done with the planetary grids to protect them. And that leads us to round tables. We'll actually learn round tables before we learn some of the hard stuff of the problem. The basic principles of what round tables are. Round tables are a very special technology that were used in the ancient days when humans were breatharians, when they had their full 12-strand or higher DNA activated, and when the planetary grids weren't distorted. Round tables were the technologies, the intertemplar technologies, that groups of humans used to manually operate the stargates on this planet, to manually operate the ley lines and grid systems of this planet. The human race was commissioned as the keepers of the Templar of this planet and in this time matrix. We were the guardians and keepers. That means we were given the privilege and the massive responsibility of trying to make sure things were going right in the energy systems within the planet. That's why we were given the ability to actually get together in groups and, through our divine blueprint, running the higher frequency primal life force currents into the planetary grids to facilitate healing, which also allowed us the power to manually operate stargates and grids. We're going to learn round tables here, the beginning technologies of round tables. Not so we can start to control stargates yet. All right? That's a while away. There's still some spiritual maturity lessons that have to be learned on that, because there's a lot of consequences. If we could all leave this workshop and go find the stargates immediately and open them and close them at will, we would probably create a mess in other fields of reality that we don't even realize are there yet. Because what happens here to a stargate will affect whatever else that stargate is connected to. The first thing we're going to learn to do round tables for is to begin recoding the D12 Christos Divine Blueprint into the planetary grids, using a very special layout of where bodies are positioned in relation to each other, using Master's Merkaba mechanics in order to reset the Divine Blueprint first within our own body template as we run the currents, which will give us an automatic, what's called a Maharic seal. A Maharic seal will allow you to participate in group Merkaba mechanics without taking on any of the energy signatures from the group. People that are practicing Merkaba mechanics and teaching them in groups, which I've seen being done in the New Age movement, that are not teaching how to activate your Maharic shield, are doing a horrible disservice to people. And the people who taught them to do that know they're doing a disservice, they don't care. The disservice is when you do a Merkaba with a group, if you do not have your Maharic seal activated, and that's a technique we'll learn here. We learned it in Cathara, but for the people who weren't in Cathara, we're going to relearn it here, so everybody gets to do it. Maharic seal not only allows you to run your primal life force currents from the D12 level and higher, which means you can't access the higher ones to run them into the grids without it, but it also creates a field barrier of D12 frequency, which means anything that's harmonious can move through you and back out again. But it will transmute anything that doesn't belong in your divine blueprint from entering your fields. The disservice that's being done in other Merkaba mechanic technologies is they are not teaching Maharic seal. They're teaching people how to activate portions of their Merkaba. And they're doing it in groups. And everybody is taking on whatever's stuck in everybody else's field. We all have something called miasms in our fields, which are distortions in the natural templates and frequencies that we're supposed to be carrying. We can heal these, but if you are not running D12 frequency through a Maharic seal, you'll begin to take on your neighbor's miasms and you'll begin to give them to your neighbor. So the group Merkaba technologies we're going to be using, every one of them are built on being able to run D12 primal Christos current. Because without that, you have to be crazy or up to something no good to run Merkaba, because you can create harm for yourself, others, and the planet. We're going to learn something in this workshop that when I was given the information on this, I was appalled. I was speechless, believe it or not. I was speechless for a while at the magnitude of the technology and the will of ill intention that has been orchestrated on this planet. The magnitude of the technology itself makes everything, all the technology things that we have on the planet right now, look like kindergarten child's play. These are technologies that have the ability to reverse the orbital patterns of planets around their suns, which is what was done to Nibiru. The technologies that were done here, if they aren't healed during this Stargate opening cycle, there's going to be a major problem. They will cause pole shift because of the distortions in the planetary grids. We're going to learn about some agreements that were made between certain fallen angelic races who thought they were going to lose the game in this time, this time period. So they decided that they would join what's called the Emerald Covenant. The Emerald Covenant is the founders' original co-creation treaty for this time matrix that was built upon loving co-creation and co-evolution. There were agreements made in 1992 called the Pleiadian-Sirian Agreements that were made between certain groups of fallen angelic Anunnaki races, where they agreed to assist the founders' races in the Christos realignment mission. Because of these agreements, for a while, the New Age movement was gaining solidarity, and the people were all working the same agenda. The channels were working the same agenda as other people. The Pleiadian-Sirian Agreements were broken recently. There are a series of events that took place that began in September of 2000. In fact, September 12th, 2000. The anniversary of that was the Trade Center fiasco. At that point, there was something called the United Intruder Resistance that was formed. And this is a problem. It's a problem because right now, there are factions of people in human bodies that are called the Illuminati collectively. There were a bunch of different competing factions of Illuminati, each holding the agenda of one of the fallen angelic races. And they were all competing with each other. Because the guardian races and the founders have done so well so far in this Stargate opening cycle to get the grids clear, all the fallen angelic groups that don't like each other decided that they were going to join forces in order to stop the Christos realignment mission. We are in the middle of that. When the fallen angelics agree to do something, that means they're going to motivate their Illuminati humans to fulfill certain agendas. The humans themselves won't even know the bigger picture. They'll just know the little part they're being impulsed to do. We're in the middle of what could be a mess, and it's a mess that could end up in World War III between 2003 and 2006. The guardian races, the founders' races, the indigo children that are awakening on the planet, and the humans that are awakening on the planet have a chance to heal this before it gets any worse. There was something called a crisis intervention mission was begun after September 2000 when the United Resistance issued an edict of war against the founders' races. The last time an edict of war was issued from the fallen angelic collectives to the founders' races was in the first seeding of the human race on this planet. I believe that was 25 million years ago. It ended in something called the Electric Wars. The Electric Wars were a period in history where everything on the planet was literally vaporized. The life forms here. Nobody won that round. Seeding 2 had to take place after the grids were rebalanced, and that's why humans came back again. Then there was something called the 1,000 Years War. That wasn't even, that was a small war compared to the Electric Wars when the fallen angelics actually took on the founders, which is really dumb. It's like a dumb thing to do because the founders races have access to primal current. They're running source current. You're not going to overpower source. There was another period after the second seeding had got started and was doing well. It was called the 1,000 Years War. Again, the same beings showing up We have basically several groups. We have Anunnaki fallen angelics, and we have various groups of those competing with each other. And we have Draconian and Reptilian fallen angelics competing with the Anunnaki and with each other, all of them trying to take control of this time matrix. Now, we're in the third seeding of the human race on this planet. This is the third seeding because twice it's literally been wiped out completely. I mean, if there were 5 left standing, and either of those times, a new seeding wouldn't have been needed, as long as there was a male-female mix. But literally, everything was obliterated. That's kind of amazing to think that something like that could happen. We're so sheltered in our little thought field in this time frame. And we're taught a history that is so tiny. Our history has been so edited. Our memory banks have been messed with on a planetary level, not just on a personal level. It's hard for us to remember or even think about what it could mean to have a drama that big unfold. But what's interesting is the people that are on planet right now, if they could get their memory back, they would know it was possible because they lived through or died through the other ones. We all have a part of ourselves that are connected to those time frames when the cataclysms happened. That is part of what's called the race karma imprint, and it's coming back through now. It's reactivating. Our Atlantean karma is coming back. It's reactivating the planetary grids, and in the race morphogenetic field, or the race thought field, we are going to live the same mess if we don't be aware of what it is and do things to change it. That's what this work is about. And it's not sad work. When you begin to see the magnitude of the drama, it's mind-blowing. At least it was for me. I mean, I was prepared to come in and say, okay, yeah, we're gonna teach, basic Christos teachings. That's great. I didn't commission for wartime. I mean, war, fallen angelics do that. My own history, my own remembered history, taught me that, but I didn't know what it meant. In this lifetime, you might wonder, I don't talk about myself very much because I don't particularly like to, but once in a while, it helps people to understand the sincerity that I speak with, and also to understand the amount of education that I have to speak about what I speak about. In this lifetime, I came in as what's called an indigo child. I birthed in as an indigo child. As an indigo child, I had, and all indigo children have this, DNA strand template 6 was activated, not just the first 3. But most indigo children don't know that when they birth in. Usually they have to go through activation of strands 4 and 5 before strand 6 kicks in and they start to get their soul memory banks back. Because I had a little problem with what's called fetal integration, and when I realized what I was getting into, I tried to spiral back out so I didn't incarnate. I had to be thrown into my heart chakra. So that's literally how I integrated into the baby body's heart chakra, is where my soul integrated, instead of through the crown chakra. What that did was loosen the seal, or open the seal on the heart chakra, which activated strand 4, DNA strand 4, which we'll talk about, the DNA strand templates. What that did was allow prematurely the memory banks, the reincarnational memory banks, to be opened. So from the time that I came into the baby body, before it left my mother's womb, I remembered. I remember my entire fetal integration process. I remember who I was before I got into the body, and I remember trying to run like heck when I found out what I'd actually got myself into down here. And by the time I was born, I had pictures running, movies, like videos in my head of different lifetimes. And they just go on and on and on. When I was very small, I didn't know what the heck it meant. I figured everybody did that. I figured everybody had those pictures. I knew that my mother was the person who had burned me on a cross in the last time we met each other. I remembered that very clearly. And I was amazed because she didn't remember. And then I was kind of relieved after I got older. I was relieved that she didn't remember. I used to have vivid memories of drowning, which is how I left, one particular lifetime. I had movies running in my head before I could talk. By the time I was about, I think 18 months, my mother said I started talking. I was an early talker. Surprise. She said I used to terrify her because she'd, put the baby down for the night, and she'd go in and look at me to check on me, and I'd be laying there asleep with my eyes wide open, talking. And then I'd become aware of her without even shifting focus and say, angels are talking to me, leave me alone. They're coming to take me home, right? So I tell her this stuff, and I vaguely remember that, except most of my consciousness was focused there, talking to other things that nobody else could see. So by the time I could speak, the inner perceptions had developed where I not only had movies running, I was starting to understand what they were. I knew they were other lifetimes, and I was not raised in a framework where reincarnation was part of our religious training or anything. My mother was a Protestant, and my father was a Catholic. His brother was a priest. We were not taught reincarnation in our family. But I remembered, and I knew that that was natural. But I was still under, at age 4 through 6, I was still under the illusion that everybody else did too, remembered too. And I had a lot of problems with remembering people, like when I would be in preschool or whatever, like go up and hug somebody because you remembered them from another life, and they kind of look at you and go, what are you doing? So there's a whole process. It's tough for kids that have memories. Some of the indigo babies that are coming in now are going to have this. Or some of it would come through with just, you'd meet somebody, total stranger, didn't matter what age, what race, what context. If you knew them and were close to them in another lifetime, you just have this heart chakra thing happen, and you just love them. I want to go home with you, not my mommy, that kind of thing. So I went through these periods of this. And at the age of 4, I started to, later I recognized that what happened at the age of 4 was certain groups became aware of who I was before I did. Certain fallen angelic groups were very aware that I had come in. They're aware of every indigo that comes in, but I didn't know that then. I didn't know I was an indigo then. I just knew that I remembered all these things, and I know I was all these people, and I was trying to balance the perceptions. But I started to get tracked. First with what are called the Zeta races, the little gray things that people in the UFO movement are seeing, and literally lived in terror because they were starting the abduction scenario with me. And then it got stopped. And that's when the ones I remember talking to when I was 2 years old, and my mother, come in and look at me and say, I'm talking to the angels, they intervened. They weren't angels, any more than humans are, because humans are angels. I was fortunate that a group that came to be known as the Guardian Alliance, to put it easy, had intercepted what was an attempt to wipe out me and my body before it got old enough to activate the DNA where I would fully understand what those memory imprints were about and understand the mission that I came to be a part of. Because I came through with a contract that was called a speaker's contract, an Emerald Covenant speaker's contract. That Emerald Covenant speaker's contract wasn't something I had memory of when I was a child. I just knew I was here, and it was important, and it was a mission, and I didn't want to be here because it wasn't as nice as I hoped it would be. I was fortunate that the Guardian Alliance groups, which are a part of the founders, Christos Founders Race collectives, had intervened and protected me, because I wouldn't be here speaking to you now. I wouldn't even be alive in body, because what they wanted, the fallen angelic groups that were behind the Zeta races, what they wanted to do is destroy me before I woke up enough and before I started speaking. And that was before I even knew I was a speaker. It's like having the cards stacked against you and you don't even know they're stacked against you. By the time I was 7, I entered training with the Guardian Alliance groups. Training with the Guardian Alliance was very interesting. It was nothing like being contacted by Zetas. There was no fear involved. But I was offered opportunity to go into a state of what's called Merkaba, which we talked about in Cathara Healing Level 1, but we'll also talk about here. It is a certain thing that then when your DNA template activates in the appropriate way, you can literally transmute the cellular structure of your body and shift its angular rotation of particle spin and pop up in another space-time frame. I know these things are real for 2 reasons. One, because I remember fully ascension in a biblical period, lifetime, where I was a woman named Miriam, who was the half-sister of a person named Jeshua. Why I really remember it's true, it's not just a vague memory, is because I was taken into Merkaba, and I underwent those physical changes to be taken into training with a group called the Iani. Iani means of the Yanis. They are a group of angelic human indigo children that are a very ancient race that have evolved in inner earth. They began to take me and train me in various things, everything from the history, the forgotten and forbidden history, to spiritual mechanics in the Melchizedek cloister tradition, to Keylontic science, which is the basis of all of the technologies that we are bringing through now. I went through training until I was about 18, and at the age of 18 I had a near-death experience which brought it all really home for me. I found out one thing in the near-death experience, that yep, it's all real, and yep, I'm still alive, and my body is down there, and I can feel its frequency dropping. I was given a choice as to whether I would leave or whether I would go back and finish what I'd originally commissioned to do. I probably would have stayed gone if I hadn't had an infant daughter by that time. And they told me one thing. The guardians told me one thing. They said, we won't pressure you or make the decision for you, but the problems that you had, meaning the open perceptions, interdimensional perceptions, the reincarnational memory, those things, the speaker's contract, she would have that too. And without me, she wouldn't be able to understand what it meant, and it would terrify her. And an image of my infant daughter came. Yeah, I still have the image, like a Kodak snapshot in her little pink polka dotted outfit. I couldn't stay, even though it's nicer. After you cross over, you're into more expanded fields. It feels better. I came back and still was trying to understand what all of this stuff meant. God, I'm being taken to places, my body's disappearing and reappearing in other places that most people don't even consider real. I kept being taken to a place called the Interdimensional Association of Free World Center for Interdimensional Communication Development. Now, this is a place that is located in the time 6520 AD, okay, future time. But it's a physical place when your body has that angular rotation of particle spin. It is connected. It lives on the location of what we call Kauai, Hawaii today. So it's the same location. But in this time frame, that is a density 2 Terran time frame, there are a very different civilization that is one of the probable civilizations that will evolve from this period of time if the fallen angelics do not get control of the planetary grids and the Mente stargates. After the near-death experience and my choice to come back, I still didn't understand a third of what I really wanted to, as far as answering the questions, because when you grow up awake and aware, it can be very, very confusing trying to make sense of it within the context of the culture and the things you're being taught here. I was offered the opportunity to receive what are called Melchizedek Cloister ordinations. Now, the ordinations, they had let me know that I came in as a level 3 ordinate, which means I had not finished the other ordinations in other lifetimes. These are different than what are called Melchizedek initiations. There's 12 levels of initiation for every ordination level. Okay, what's being practiced by the other Melchizedeks that don't use the name cloister at the end, they are doing initiations, and you will get one ordination. We are doing levels of ordination. Now, the reason I'm able to give the transmissions for ordinations, Melchizedek cloister ordinations, is because they were given to me. When I was 18, they began more active study, where I literally had to rearrange my life around what periods of time I could be vacant from the planet, where I could leave and make sure the kids are taken care of and that kind of stuff, because I have to go for a lesson. And when I was taken into inner Earth this time, not to the place in future time, but to the inner Earth civilizations where the Iani have their cultures. That's where something called the Amente crystal temples exist. These are physical, massive crystal structures. They're absolutely beautiful. And they are what run the stargates, actually. They are the manual control grid in inner Earth for the stargates of inner Earth, but also the ones for the halls of Amente stargates. I was taken there at various times, and it was explained to me that I was given a level, I had come in with level 3 ordination, which is a regent ordination. That means it's the avatar level ordination. So I was like, okay, great, what does that mean? Because I didn't have all the technology to understand it by then. I progressed from regent up through what's called an Ekar ordination, which is the 6th level and the final level of ordination. And at that point, my planetary service contract that was connected to my galactic and universal service contract was kind of put on the board before me, and I had the choice whether I'd accept that ordination or not, because it meant I was locking myself in to have to fulfill what I came to do on the planet, because if I didn't, there would be a whole team of indigo children that if I didn't bring the information through that they were waiting for, would not be able to wake up in time. So I took the responsibility, and it was done out of love. This is why it irks me to death. When some of the people that are channeling and stuff, their channels tell them, where's the love? Say, try my life on for size. Try the last 30 years of my life, and then you'll be able to answer your own question. Because there's one thing that motivated me the whole time, was I progressively understood the value of the teachings that were being given to me and the freedom that it allowed me. the freedom in this society to be able to be taken through a Stargate or walk through a Stargate and disappear, turn into light, and pop up somewhere else. If I could give that freedom to 5 other people, I would feel so good, you know, just because, my God, we're not trapped here. That's why I came back, because I might not be able to get anybody through a Stargate. I'd be lucky if I learned enough to get myself through without the help of the Yanni. But if I could bring the teachings here like they were giving to me, people would eventually be able to do that for themselves. As things progressed and my education progressed, I learned more about what my personal life history had been and where all the movies fit. Because the movies were like simultaneously running videos. Look over here and it's doing that, look over here, it's doing that. And this is all going on while I'm trying to do my schoolwork and things like that. You know, like, put that over here, please, can I concentrate? A, B, C. Finally, as I approached about age 28, I started to see the sequencing, the linear time sequencing that was involved with the lifetimes, where I get the whole sequence of the life, or at least the most important ones. We all have like 1,728 different lives that are running simultaneously. To remember, I don't have all my files opened because I'm only opening the ones that are most important to my mission this time, and the body can only hold so much of that memory when the planetary grids are only activated to a certain level, because it shuts down the rest of the DNA. So I learned what it meant to be who I was. And through that, what was I was terrified most of my childhood and adolescence. I was scared to death of what was happening to me, yet I felt a presence with me. A presence of rightness and a presence of what I can only describe as God. I knew that even though it seemed confusing, there was a place where it made perfect sense, and I knew that I was okay, even in the most precarious situations. I was always grateful for that knowing. That's another thing, that if I could give people a gift, I would give that to them, every last one of them, because you'd never doubt again that no matter what happens outside around you, you will be okay. No matter what drama you're involved in, if you know that presence with you, which is a piece of yourself that never left connection to Source, you will, even if you don't know the mechanics yet, you can trust that part. You can surrender and say, okay, whatever, let my will be thy will, is what I used to say, meaning divine will. Whatever my will is, I give it back. You know, I just want what's right to happen here. And I went through a lot of my life that way until I started to understand more of the mechanics, and I was given the heavy master's training and those kind of things, and then asked to go speak, which was the most terrifying thing I was ever asked to do, because I was on a vow of silence, where I was not allowed to speak about it until after I turned adult age, because they probably would have locked me up someplace if I had been, you know, a 6-year-old talking about last time when she was in the biblical period. You know what I mean? Doesn't go over too well in modern culture. It all brought me to the point where in 1999, well, actually between the end of 1996 and the middle of 1997, I was asked to take down transmission of books. Books that were being transmitted, not in a channeling sense, but from something called holographic discs that since I was 7, I had begun receiving training to be able to access. They're called the Cloister Door Tour plates. And we'll get into the history of those a little bit tonight. The Cloister Door Tour plates are physical technologies, but they're transharmonic, which means they can go in this density and they can also go up to the next density level. These plates are holographic discs that have had the stored records, the founders' records, encoded. Maybe our history was lost and forbidden here, but somebody kept track of it. They were the history records of the mechanics of science and spirituality as originally taught by the founders, the original founders' teachings. They had the history, the complete history of our time matrix encoded within them, including the future history and the probabilities that will emerge from what we call the present. I was trained since I was 7 to begin transmission, receiving energy from those plates. At first I had to be physically present and holding them in my hand, but after a while, when my DNA was keyed to their frequency, I was trained to be able to pull that information through and translate it into my home language this time, which is English. So when I was asked to begin the translations on the plates, it ended up with first a book called Voyagers 1, and that was called The Sleeping Abductees, and it was geared toward the people who were having issues with UFOs and the abduction phenomena. So they would begin to understand what was happening, because there was a whole group of people that are not accepted in the New Age movement usually. They're kind of like off on their own, trying to get help through psychiatry and realizing that's not the place to go after a while unless you want to get locked up in a funny farm. So the book was for them. And then right after that, when that was ready to go to press, they also told me that, here, this is going to be your publisher, send it to them. I said, okay. And the publisher said, yeah, we'll publish that, no problem. So no pink slips from publishers that didn't want to publish it. They told me he was going to publish it. And he had been told, too, the publisher had been told that he was going to get the book submitted. Right when book 1 was supposed to come out, I got a message from the IANI, and they said, stop the presses. Something has happened that's extremely important. And they kept saying, the ark has sparked, the ark has sparked. They were, what are you talking about? They were talking about the Ark of the Covenant. And I didn't know what that was then. I didn't have the history records on it yet. The Ark of the Covenant is a portal passage. It's a portal passage that has been, used to come down in Atlantis, but now, since the Atlantean period where the grids were damaged, it was moved to Giza, Egypt. It's right literally under the Great Pyramid. And there was a certain thing that needed to happen with the Ark of the Covenant. It had to activate because of certain frequencies hitting it for the Stargate opening cycle to actually take place this time. When they had told me the Ark had sparked, they weren't even sure. The Guardian races weren't sure. The fallen angelics weren't sure. Nobody was sure if we were actually going to fulfill a stellar activation cycle this time. They didn't know because of the grid damage if the grid speed would pick up enough. It was almost preferable if it didn't, because it would have postponed the final conflict drama. Except there was a problem. If the stellar activation cycle didn't take place now, it wouldn't have made it to the next cycle because of the Zetas on the planet and what they were doing with the planetary grid. Because we've been being visited here for the last 70 years. Our governments, particularly the states and a few other countries, have been working, certain factions of them, not the external governments, but a few people in very key positions have been working with the Zeta races who are running a draconian one world order dominion agenda. Because of what's going down with that, if the stellar activation cycle didn't consummate this time, the planet literally would have imploded before the next period, possible period. So the Ark has sparked was a great thing. And it meant there was a whole bunch more information that had to be brought through. Sleeping abductees, that was like great. Let the people have that problem, deal with that, that'll help them. But now, and this is where Voyagers Volume 2, The Secrets of Amente, started. The Secrets of Amente got into everything. It got into stuff that had to do with our history and a race called the Turanicium race, which was the original seed race for humans. And before the Turanicium, they were Orifeme. So we began to learn the lost history of our race. We know we didn't come out of apes. We weren't, pond scum and then happened to, evolve up on land and, go through that process. So the history records began to be given. But they were done in a way, in Voyagers Volume 2, first edition, there was still hope that the Anunnaki fallen angelic races were going to honor the Emerald Covenant. So it was done very gently and very carefully, where we weren't exposing Anunnaki races, we weren't exposing any names here as far as, who's channeling what. It was done very gently, hoping that the Anunnaki races would fulfill their promises to the Emerald Covenant, to the founders. That book caused a storm unto itself, and there was a lot of people, even the ones working with Anunnaki matrices, that were interested in the work. By the time we got the books out into the public, that's when I had to start talking about them. That's when weird stuff started to happen, where there'd be people that would just turn on me, like literally for no reason. That's when I started to get my rude awakening education, where you start to realize that some people are being manipulated by things they don't see and they don't want to know. And they would be used to try to intimidate me or try to, get me off path. I had Freemasons try to get me to join their lodges, and so did you, before you ever met me. I had all sorts of interesting things taking place that I was trying to keep up with what was going on. Finally, it all came out when the Palladian-Syrian agreements of 1992 were finally and completely broken. Because at that point, the Founders Races and the Guardian Alliance and the IANI had to go into expose. They had to bring through the whole thing as far as what is going down here so people could start to protect themselves and not be manipulated, and so we could get the good work done. Voyagers Volume 2 took 18 months to redo after they sold out of Volume 1, and it's actually Voyagers Volume 2 second edition took 18 months from the time it had sold out as, regular Voyagers Volume 2, first edition. It's about double the size now, and it has all the updated information. It doesn't have everything that's in your Templar manuals. There's a bunch of things in there that are more into the mechanics and in some areas that Voyagers couldn't be any longer. I couldn't include it in there. But it brings us up to date with the stuff we're going to be brought up to date with by the end of this workshop, which goes from what are stargates and what does all that have to do with anything, all the way up to the history, to the point where we understand what we're in the middle of, why the Trade Center thing happened, and what we need to do to begin creating a protection field in the planetary grids. And as we help the planet protect itself, we also do the same thing to our own biofields. That's where roundtables come in. We'll learn roundtables through this workshop, and we will probably leave here. I don't know, the first time I was exposed to this information and it wasn't all in one block, I felt just kind of dizzy and like my head was buzzing with information. I hope by the end of this that I'm able to bring through the most important parts of things so you can understand and relate to the significance of what we're doing. I hope that when it comes to roundtables, which are a unique experience, it was my first reaction was embarrassment. Like, it's one thing to learn to do your Merkaba and to actually use the body's momentum of spin to begin to reset to the Christos template, your natural Merkaba spin. But when you're doing that with, like, sometimes 50-some other people standing in a very specific grid, now, this is where roundtable technology comes in. It's using the natural personal Merkaba fields in the natural way they were designed to be used with a group of people, so they have the ability to run enough frequency together to bring a part of the divine blueprint back into the planetary grids in the locations that they run the roundtables. This is why we've been asked to do roundtables. Because if there's not enough areas on the planet within the next 3-year period that hold D12 frequency, and if some of the control grids that are being used by the fallen angelics are not blocked and literally recalibrated, they won't be blocked, they're more like recalibrating, because D12 frequency will reorder to its natural divine blueprint whatever frequency it encounters. But if there's not enough critical mass D12 frequency divine blueprint held in the planetary grids by 2003, there's going to be real problems. And the Guardians have mentioned one thing to me that they had never, ever, ever mentioned before, because they were never into doom and gloom. They were never into the end time scenarios or any of that. They said if by the end of 2003 certain things haven't reached a certain level in the planetary grids, they have to go to evacuations, because they're not going to be able to stop it from rolling. Now, I don't like to carry that message. In fact, it irks the heck out of me to carry that message, because that could be scary. Darn it, that is scary. Could be. Yeah. It's scary only if you worry about death and simple things like that. If you know you're going to transition and you know how to do it through your Christos template, well, then you don't have to worry about it too much. But for what something like that means to the masses of people out there who are stuck in 3D mainstream mentality, it means a period of terror for them, like nothing they've ever seen. And it doesn't have to happen. We've been asked to help. We can't fix it all by ourselves. We can't magically restore the grids, that have been damaged for over 200,000 years, magically restore them in a 3-year period all by our lonesome. But what we can do is begin to remember the angelic human original divine commission, what our DNA was designed to do as part of that commission, and begin to choose to do what we originally came to do. If we do our part, there are other beings in other places that are doing their part, and together we can stop that type of end-time scenario from happening, and instead create a field. It's called a trion miage field, which means a primal light and sound field, buffer blanket around the planet that will get it through this stellar activation cycle without creating pole shift. Because stellar activation cycles, once they start, if you stop them once they start, it will create pole shift, and it has in the past. If the planetary grids are blocked, damaged, or running the wrong mathematical coding during a stellar activation cycle, if there's enough of that, it will create pole shift anyway, even if the gates stay open. Or it will create major geographical changes, geological changes in the areas where the blockages are. In this course, we're going to explore something called the Nibiruan diotic crystal grid and the checkerboard matrix. This was put in this planetary grid in 25,500 BC, and it is a hideous reverse mathematical program. that makes Earth's planetary Merkaba on the density 1 level spin in reverse. If that remains in the grids, and the fallen angelic Anunnaki races who put it here knew that it would, if it remains in the grids, it would create pole shift. We've been progressively working to recalibrate those sites that have been the anchoring rods for those places for the Nibiru and Dadic crystal grid technologies. They are the nasty Atlantean technologies that the legends talk about, how the divine technologies were misused, the crystalline technologies. What's interesting is when Az and I went on vacation, yeah, right, we were supposed to take a couple days off between the Gathara workshop and this workshop, and we were guided to go up to Lake Louise for just rest and recuperation. Well, we were like sick from the time we got there. So, what's up? Something's up. We thought we was just like fine, clear space. It was really nice down here. The grids were actually quite, doing quite well down here. Got up there and we were showed something in the middle of Lake Louise, and it looked like a big wagon wheel. I said, whose is that? And I saw a big vortex behind it that was protected by guardians. And it was like, okay, what is going on here? That doesn't look like a guardian grid. We got the transmission of information on the beginning dispensations on the Canadian grids and something called the turnstile control matrix, which is a part of the Nibiru and Dadic crystal grid matrix that controls the vertical axiotonal lines that run through the North and South American continent. Every one of these turnstile control, they're like control knobs to literally reverse the natural fire letter sequences or natural scalar wave patterns in the axiotonal lines or the grid lines that run through the North American and South American continents. Every one of them are in Canada. They're stretched across like on a vertical line. So we've been given the maps. Az, bless him, is working on the map now so we can show you, at least where those areas are. What we're doing with the round tables up here, and this is why it worked out that we happened to come up to do them instead of the person who was originally supposed to teach Kathara. We were guided up here, and this information is being given to us on security clearance now so we can get the work done before the other side tries to find out that we're trying to clear the grids and tries to stop us, as usual. So we're in the middle of something very important on a global scale, but it also comes right back home to the people who live in Canada, just like it came home to the people who live in the States when we started to get information on our grids, just like you'll learn in this workshop about the European grids that have to do with England and Ireland. And you also learn why Iraq and Iran are always fighting and a few other things when we learn about where Stargate locations are. But the purpose of the round tables this time is not just to teach you about round tables, but for those of you who decide you want to participate in the round table this time, we will be clearing the first, and it's one of the major ones. There's 11 different turnstile grids up here, and each of them from like 1 to 11 is a progressively higher amount of frequency and can control the ones below it. What was being done through this time period right now is the Illuminati races, as part of a larger program that started in September of 2000, they were beginning to activate number 10, and that's the one that was located in Lake Louise. We were sent out on a little mission at midnight, borrowed a flashlight from the front desk, and went out to literally just run what are called the Vecca codes. Now we'll talk about Vecca codes. That's a new part that's being added into the manuals here, just like it was added into Kathara. Vecca code technology can be used in relation to planetary Templar work as well as in relation to personal Templar work. We'll get into here talking about radial body technology, which was the new information that was released in Kathara this time, but we're going to talk about it on a planetary level. And we're going to be shown how to do very, very powerful round tables. And this first one, we've kind of set in the grids that are implanted at Lake Louise. We basically temporarily neutralized it by running the frequencies through that we did. It needs more kick behind it because we're only 2 people. And even though we can run a lot of frequency when we're trying, it never counter the effects of a large amount of people running the Vecca codes and all of that frequency. We have the ability to reset the divine blueprint here and transmit it up because we left, let's say, a receiver pattern up in Lake Louise. We can transmit that frequency there, and it will begin to transmit the D12 out, just like it was supposed to. According to those who set it there in the Illuminati vein, it was supposed to transmit the reverse matrix codes out to begin really getting control of the axiotonal lines in the North and South American continent. The reason this was being done has to do with something called a frequency fence. A frequency fence is a type of scalar wave technology, scalar pulse technology, that for about 70 years, and they won't tell you that, but certain governments have been experimenting with. Part of this technology has to do with HAARP up in Alaska. At this HAARP, yeah, actually I can never remember the thing of it. That's that, I'm picturing it. I don't know how do I describe it. It's the radio antenna things that are supposed to, yeah. In fact, when we get into HAARP, I have the rundown on exactly what it is. It's hard for me to try to verbalize what that is. It's the right. You got it, yeah. It's a research project that's being run by the government and also the Phillips Corporation, I believe, that was set up to supposedly do certain things that were positive for the planet, for the planet, and for giving the military and things like that the ability to, I believe, like see deep ocean and that kind of thing. But that was really a cover for what this technology is. The technology is being called into activation for what it was designed to do, which was to be a transmitter and receiver of certain types of frequencies. A frequency fence can be created through only one installation like that when it's linked in to these other grids that I've been talking about. As we go through this course, we'll learn about something called APIN systems, Atlantean Pylon Implant Network systems, which were crystal implants that were placed in the grids in Atlantean times. The HAARP situation was created to begin their activation process. The 11 points turnstile grid that's running through Canada is a part of that system. So what is going to happen if we don't begin to reset the divine blueprint, the D12 frequencies into the planetary grids? And that's all we have to do. We don't have to do anything except just run our own D12 Christos currents in a round table formation. If we don't do that, the frequency fence, which is a type of frequency that will run through the planetary grids and it will affect the DNA of everything on the planet, it's meant to, first of all, keep us from having our DNA activating any further. So our perceptions don't begin to go into the astral field, so we can begin to see what's happening in D4. There's literally, the Illuminati are moving forward with their mission of assisting visitation to take place on this planet, but getting people in a very controllable state before that happens. The frequency fence broadcasts were started in the States over Labor Day of this past Labor Day of 2001, and we didn't know about it, and the Guardian groups literally let us know live during one of the workshops that it was starting now, and this was like a week before the Trade Center thing happened. So what we're doing now is helping to free the Canadian grids from the manipulation matrix that's been here and that's being activated now. Interestingly, at the end of this course, we're going to learn something that's about the hardest thing to learn, and that's the who's who. When I talk about something called the intruder resistance, who are these people? Who are the fallen angelics that I talk about? And there's a whole bunch of different groups of them. We'll learn who they are, and then we'll learn what parts of the grids they've been controlling. And one of the major control groups that is an Andromi, what are called Andromi, Necromaton, Nephilim, fallen angelics, calls itself the Archangel Michael Matrix. This is why the people who were channeling Archangel Michael wouldn't join us for this particular workshop. They decided that they wouldn't have Cathara healing in their house. Unfortunately, what they're saying is they won't have D12 Christos frequency in their house, and they're really selling themselves short. So we're going to learn where all those pieces fit together, and it all comes back to no matter how difficult a situation might seem, there is a solution, and we can be safe by choosing to anchor our own D12 Christos level of consciousness and the rest of our Rishi identity and our Ascendant Master identity to activate and consciously develop our conscious connection to God. With that, we will be able to walk through and do what needs to be done here in love, in absolute love. The Archangel Michael Matrix and the various other intruder or ET races or fallen angelic races, because ET and fallen angelic mean the same thing. All right? These other races are choosing to take a stand against the founders. The founders were, resetting the divine blueprint in this entire time matrix for many millions of years, or billions of years. It was time for Earth to get its divine blueprint reset. And it's not us that's creating the division between people. We are saying we are all one. We are of the law of one, all of us. Come and work cooperatively and lovingly together. It is the other matrices that are choosing to stand and consider us adversaries that are creating the divisions, and they do anything but send love in our direction. I'd like you to know that as we start this odyssey of exploring information that takes us into some really wild places, that the place to explore it through is the place of the law of one that lives within you and the place of Christos love that lives within you. You may find me and as getting very passionate sometimes about, we'll do everything we can to assist the Christos realignment mission here to get the divine blueprint back in, because it's absolutely horrible what the fallen angelics are intending to do here. It's already horrible what they did here. But that doesn't mean they're hated. It doesn't mean they are not loved, because both Az and I share the understanding that no matter what they've done, they have done it out of their own convolution of consciousness, where they no longer remember their connection to Source. So just like a child who is doing bad or horrible things, you may need to intervene and stop that behavior, at least to protect it from destroying or harming other people. But that does not mean the child is intrinsically bad. It means the behavior needs to be corrected, and the child needs to grow in order to understand how to be self-regulating. Right now what's taking place with the fallen angelic legions, it is not a battle in our world of good versus evil. It is a battle in their world of good versus evil. And they like to call us the evil ones because we're trying to anchor the divine blueprint, and that's against what their objectives are. When you find out what the objectives are, it'll blow your mind, at least it did mine. It has to do with something called phantom matrix. Phantom matrix is a black hole sub-time distortion system that was created 250 billion years ago in this time matrix. It was not originally part of the divine blueprint. It was one of those accidents that can happen through free will and the ability of having probability. This is what we've been trying to heal. The founders have been trying to heal for 250 billion years. But the phantom matrix is the location from which the fallen angelic races are coming and contacting here. So as we begin to find out about this, we'll start to understand the stories that were in the Bible a little better about heaven and hell. Because a place that was referred to as hell or Hades was phantom matrix. And that's where, if the fallen angelics have their way, they are going to drag this planet and its people and its consciousness field into. And that's what the guardian races are saying, no, I'm sorry, we love you dearly, but we can't permit you to do that. We are going to anchor the divine blueprint. The divine blueprint will hold the planetary grids here, stable in this time matrix, so it cannot be dragged into the black hole system. And that's really what this is all about. It's hugely spiritual, but it's hugely scientific all at the same time. To begin, after my long-winded introduction, I would like to go to a place of, there's a place, I forget what page it is in the manual. Do you know what page that is?
I don't know. I'll check.
Yeah, because what we're going to do is go through a reading of something that I think is worth reading. There are certain parts of the material that come through in a way that makes a very clear frequency bridge, where some parts I can capsulize and run it off the top of my head, but other parts it's worth reading. So we're going to read this part to you, as it's going to read to you something that was originally given to us on the law of one, and what that is and what it isn't. So we begin to understand what the teachings that you will move into here are a part of, what they stand for. So if there's any fear, like the people working with the micromatrix were being beamed in to be afraid of us, they're calling us the dark side, the dark teachings. You can make up your own mind if you think these are dark teachings. But if these are dark teachings, I'd hate to see what they're teaching on the other side. This will help to get across the sentiment and the love that we are moving through now. There's going to be a part after, as reads that I want to get into the CDD plates a little bit and the history about these CDD plates. Because these plates were originally translated in the biblical times. We'll talk about that, but they were translated way before that as well. So I'd like you to understand there's certain parts of this that I think if I can give you a good solid foundation in certain areas, the rest will progressively make sense. So we're going to start with that. It's almost like we'll start slow, and then we're going to get into, between tomorrow and the next day, we're going to cover a lot of information. I think there's more pages in this manual than there is in the Kathara book. But we're going to start with the Law of one, what is that? What does it mean? And we'll go from there to the CDD plates. Here you go.
Swapping over the microphone.
Mm-hmm. Is it okay if I... I love this reading.
Just to add a brief comment to what Ashana was saying about the Canadian grid. She hasn't seen the detail of the plots that... Pardon, I can't hear you. I'm just going to add a comment. Usually any of this stuff we kind of agree it beforehand, but the Canadian grid work that I've been completing, Ashana hasn't seen the detail of it yet. And all I wanted to say to you was that looking at what I'm looking at, and we take it up another level and get final corroboration before we share it and show it. But the round table we'll do before we finish this weekend is going to be one of the most important round tables we've ever run. I can see that certain of the elements of the 11 point actually connect with the wormholes that we used for the New York City disaster, photosonic pulse. And there are other connections that are made by this Canadian grid that are showing me that there's a hyper-significance about the way that photosonics are actually run through the grid. And Canada seems to be, you could call it a headquarters, but it's a principal distribution point, not just because of HARP, but because of the way the distribution lines are running through it. Anyway, more of that later. I thought I'd mention it though. Okay. Sometimes you read these things because even to change a word in a sentence will change the frequency of it, and it's better, since we can't remember a long piece, that we read them to you. So if you'll bear with me, there are about 4 pages of this, and it's pretty profound stuff. The law of one.
We're having difficulty hearing.
And the
mic. You turn it before you did?
yeah, is that better? Sounds awful to me, but I'll go with you. The law of one and the Emerald Covenant.
What page? 7.
7 through 11. As Right Temple members and the Emerald Covenant, the founders races who requested creation of this externalized contact point, are always willing to work lovingly, equally, cooperatively, and co-creatively with any other individual or organization that genuinely promotes and demonstrates the founders' freedom teachings of the Inner Christos. The founders' Inner Christos teachings include the Emerald Covenant, the Law of One, and the Lyre and Syrian model of peaceful, co-creative, egalitarian, self-sovereign co-evolution. The Law of One represents the Jana's Ascended Master's protocol of divine right interrelationship, which promotes unconditional love, co-nurturing, and healing of all races through the recognition that all manifest beings are faces of Source Manifest. There is only one consciousness, Source God, and all things and beings are living, diversified expressions of that common identity. The Law of One recognizes that beings who conduct themselves in seemingly ungodly ways are those who have most forgotten this core truth of their divine identity. Through healing and reawakening of the God spark within, the D12 Inner Christos, any being can eventually remember and embody its blessed heritage. When this memory returns, unconditional love and co-creative divine right interrelationship become the natural embodied instinct, and, acting as if the God in all things matters, becomes the only sane and rational use of the divine gift of self-sovereign free will. When the primal law of one is not willingly honored by beings manifest in time, their creations become progressively more convoluted, until eventually they create their own self-termination in space-time. When self-termination occurs, the one self-sentient being returns to Source God as undifferentiated units of conscious energy without memory or individuated identity recognition, where it will be recycled by Source into other creations. The advantage of awakening the God presence within is that in doing so, a being can retain its individuation of identity and the memory of its manifest experience to consciously rejoin Source through ascension. Through ascension, a being attains the conscious ability to express full mastery of chosen experience, knowing itself in at-one-ment with God, through which the natural cycle of loving, conscious co-creation within the wholeness that is God can be perpetuated. These are the core foundations and divine cognitions upon which the Law of One, the Emerald Covenant, the Lyran Syrian cultural model, and the Azurite Temple Melchizedek cloister are structured. And they are the precepts by which all free world order systems within the interdimensional association of free worlds function. The Law of One is representative of the natural laws of universal unified field physics, the divine creation mechanics by which the consciousness of Source perpetually creates the experience of manifest worlds. Without observance of the primal Law of One, a being, a race, nation, planet, galaxy, or universe will be unable to create genuine freedom, love, or joy, and will lose conscious experiential participation in the natural cycle of self-sentient eternal life perpetuation. If one's chosen ideas and actions support the Christic free will objective of ascension, identity returns to Source along the path of divine right order of conscious sentience, through which conscious knowing and co-creative participation within the perpetual eternal life cycle is infinitely retained. The Christic objective creates an experiential destiny of joy and progressive expansion of self into wholeness for consciousness within the perpetual eternal life cycle. If one's choices disregard the natural order of the Law of One and divine creation mechanics, personal energy is added to the anti-Christic imposed will objective, through which the divine gifts of ascension, co-creative sentient mastery, and conscious participation in the eternal life cycle are lost. The Antichristos agenda creates the experiential reality of limited, finite identity and a return to Source through the path of chaos, of unconscious oblivion. The antichristic objective creates an experiential destiny of sorrow and progressive breaking down of self into fragmentation of consciousness within the eternal life cycle. No action is benign. Thought and its manifest expression in action are quantities of conscious energy that reflect the intrinsic universal design of either the path of order or the path of chaos. The path of order encompasses the path of chaos, for even chaos itself exists within the expression of the divine right order of Source. Both paths culminate in return to Source and perpetual manifestation of the eternal life cycle. The significance of choosing the path of order and the Christic free will objective lies in the value and quality of perceived experience one encounters. As a participant within the eternal life dance, one will experience either the expansion of consciousness, sentient, loving, free, joyful co-creation, or the contraction and constriction of unconscious, controlled participation, through which the natural divine state of co-creative love and joy are experientially blocked from one's perceptions. Idea, belief, and action are the creative tools with which consciousness is endowed to employ the gift of free will choice as to which path of experience one will select to follow. The Christic path of order is that originally intended by Source, as loving joy is the intrinsic nature of Source. In the omnipresent Source love, the path of chaos is permitted, for without this, the option of choice would not exist. The Yanis, founders, and Christic races understand that the intrinsic nature of Source is love, and that in this love Source most desires to experience the joy of its manifest expressions, while simultaneously honoring their free will in allowing them to choose otherwise. In honor of and as a living reflection of the true loving nature of Source, the founders and Emerald Covenant races lend support to the ideas, beliefs and actions through which the path of order, the Christic free will objective, and the destiny of joy are experientially attained. They allow, but do not endorse, ideas, beliefs and actions through which the path of chaos, the anti-Christic imposed will objective, and the density of sorrow are experientially attained. The path of chaos is allowed in respect of the gift of free will choice, without which the divine objective of the destiny of joy cannot be attained. But the path of order, which is the path of divine love, is the preference of Source, and so true representatives of Source will encourage, but not force, the divine right use of free will choice in creating Source's intended divine right destiny of perpetual joy. The choice is always ours, and the founders always respect our right to choose. As individuated manifest expressions of Source God, we are imbued with the power of creation. Our choices are the tools by which our experiential reality is created. Individually and collectively, we are the creators of our experientially manifest worlds. As we progressively remember and embody our organic, blessed identity as faces of God manifest, our choices and our worlds will progressively become more godly, to reflect more of the true loving nature of God. This is the divine objective of God's Source, of the founders, and of the infinite numbers of Emerald Covenant races who strive to keep the sentient awareness and embodied demonstration of our unconditionally loving one Source perpetually alive within the many mansions of time. The founders, Emerald Covenant races, and representatives of the Azurite Temple Melchizedek Cloister extend unconditional love, respect, and shared truth to all, regardless of race or creed affiliation. The Emerald Covenant freedom teachings are once again being made available to the human collective without prejudice. Anyone from any race or religion is encouraged and welcome to participate in the Emerald Covenant, through which unconditional divine love and the freedom of the inner Christos, the path of order and the destiny of joy, is equally extended to all. One does not have to give up a previous spiritual orientation or ethnic identification to embrace the Founders' Emerald Covenant. The founders and their representatives encourage people of all persuasions to find the true teachings and ideas that support the destiny of joy, that exist behind the distortions within all of Earth's spiritual creeds and cultural ethics. Through separating the chaff from the grain and releasing the spiritual bondage of fallen angelic distortions, the world's religions can be freed from their unintended political service to the anti-Christos agenda. Through angelic human love and genuine embodiment of the D12 inner Christos awareness, the religions of earth can be restored to their original cooperative divine purpose of spiritual service to the law of one and the destiny of joy divine objective. Once purged of fallen angelic anti-Christos distortions, any religion, creed or belief system can evolve to Christos status to become a valuable and beloved asset in manifesting the experiential reality of loving, sentient, co-creative, godly, conscious participation within the perpetual dance of the eternal life cycle. On behalf of and in honor of and as a manifest reflection of the loving one source God from which we all emerge, the Founders Azurite Temple Melchizedek Cloister endorses ideas, beliefs and actions that are supportive of the destiny of joy and the Christos free will objective. The Azurite Temple Melchizedek Cloister perspective also respects the divine right and necessity of free will choice, and thus demonstrates allowance, employing no imposed resistance to the forces of the path of chaos, and the option of choosing the destiny of sorrow towards which the path of chaos inevitably leads. Unlike the promoters of fallen angelic religious and scientific control dogmas, the founders have always employed the truthful, loving, and open sharing of knowledge as a means of encouraging beings to use their inherent power of free choice to create loving, fearless, empowered experiential fulfillment of the destiny of joy. Control dogmas utilize the anti-Christos tactics of hoarding knowledge among a few elite and promoting distortions of knowledge under the guise of truth in order to seduce, trick, and deceive masses of well-meaning beings into powerlessness, fear, and inadvertent blind subservience to the path of chaos. Beings who choose the path of chaos, either knowingly or unknowingly, do so in order to remember the lesson of the value of love and free will order. One does not need to choose the destiny of sorrow in order to remember the value of its opposite. The power of free will choice can simply be used to acknowledge and embrace the divine value, rights, and responsibilities of the destiny of joy, through which the conscious decision can be made to actively embody these divine qualities. The choice is ours. In support of the destiny of joy, divine objective, the Azurite Temple Melchizedek Cloister will never endorse covert control documents, be they contemporary cults, ancient cults manifesting under the guise of traditional religions, or soulless scientific dogmas. Cult mentality inspires you to give your personal power of creation and self-generated salvation away to some externalized authority figure. A few examples of popular externalized authority figures to which we have been culturally programmed to unthinkingly subjugate our personal worth and to surrender our divinely given personal inner Christos power are as follows. External God personifications, saviors, ascended masters, saints, angels, gurus, popes, kings, priests, mystics, wizards, psychics, government, politicians, scientists, doctors, experts, critics, PhDs, and on, and on, and on. These are just a few examples of the externalized archetypal authority figures to which we have been brainwashed by propaganda into believing we have less worthiness, power, or wisdom than our own presently sleeping inner Christos. As long as we look to only external authorities for answers, we will never find the greater truths regarding ourselves and our universe that are alive and awaiting our discovery within our personal inner Christos identity. It is absolutely appropriate to embody genuine humility and offer loving, reverent respect to beings who provide us with a legitimate service in our growth to empowerment, spiritual actualization, and freedom. If we desire to embody the reality of the Christos, then loving, reverent respect, given genuinely through gentle humility, is an attitude which every creature in the universe should be treated. All beings are, after all, manifest faces of God, expressing at various stages of development. There is a huge difference between offering loving, reverent respect to others and bowing down in worshipful, self-deprecating subservience to blindly obey the control dictates of elitist power figures whose own empowerment is derived from keeping our power under their control. Without the masses who worship and obey them, elitist authority figures are utterly powerless. Without the collective from which they siphon their power, their money, their armies, and their adoration, elitist power figures do not even possess enough personal power to adequately help themselves. They have no more and no less potential than anyone else to embrace the eternal power of the inner Christos. Loving, reverent respect is unconditional and includes respecting ourselves equally as blessed faces of God. Blind worship teaches us to insult, disrespect, and deny the part of God that is manifest as the self, and encourages us to entertain the antichristic elitist notion that any being is more worthy of love and acceptance than any other in the eyes of God. Beings express at different stages of development in which corresponding levels of Christos embodiment, or lack thereof, are demonstrated. But regardless of the developmental level, all beings are living parts of God, and therefore their eternal blessed value is unquestionable. Freedom teachings lead you to the Christ within. The inner Christos tangibly exists as your higher dimensional levels of personal awareness, the rest of your own God-given blessed identity, which is your own personal, inborn, indelible, living connection to the real one source, that is God. The founders' Emerald Covenant races and the members of the Azurite Temple Melchizedek cloister will never promote control dogma tactics, such as, don't read that, it's evil, it's bad, or inspire you to self-deluding arrogance with anti-Christos sentiments such as, don't associate with them, they're evil, or less worthy, or less pure than we. On the contrary, everyone is encouraged to love all responsibly and to recognize the inborn potential for purity within all. Everyone is also encouraged to read everything, explore people, become informed, and seek knowledge. True Christic teachings inspire everyone to embrace the personal, true divine spirit, explore responsibility, be fearless, be Christ in love, to simultaneously honor the self, others, and one source, God, through fair and loving action. Learn discernment so genuine wisdom and spiritual actualization can be attained, and never settle for anything less than your own divinely given angelic human heritage. The founders and their representatives will never endorse anti-Christos creeds such as elitist race supremacy, racial or religious bigotry, prejudice, tolerance as a disguise for covert prejudicial value judgment, gender inequality, or contrived misrepresentation or manipulative concealment of truth, knowledge, or identity. The founders will not endorse abuse, violation, or exploitation of other life fields, including animals, plants, and the planetary environment. They will not promote victim versus savior consciousness, through which beings are intentionally, covertly disempowered by being seduced into believing that they are powerless to change undesirable conditions and thus need a powerful external authority, savior or God, to protect them from their own inadvertent creations. The founders will not use fear, disinformation, information suppression, or intimidation tactics to keep human races divided against each other and therefore easy subjects for covert control. And they will not manipulate people through false claims that God is of male or female gender. God is a living, eternal consciousness force that is beyond biology and polarized gender expression. The founders also will not promote a false history that misleads us into believing that God's only Son was crucified for our sins, so that we can be controlled and directed through false guilt and useless shame into martyring ourselves to prove we are equally worthy. Jesus was not crucified. He came to tell us that we are all children of God, to return the divine sacred science knowledge through which we could set ourselves free. Then he used that knowledge to conduct his own painless ascension. This is the truth of the Christ drama history, and it is the only Christ drama truth that the founders will ever endorse, because they were there, they saw it all. They will not endorse the falsehood of the alleged crucifixion because they know this story was created by the Illuminati human races on behalf of the fallen Anu Elohim in order to intentionally bury the real truth and freedom teachings for which the real Jesus Christ of 12 BC through 27 AD stood. The true Christos teachings encourage you to fearlessly but responsibly investigate everything in a loving and intelligent manner, and to learn to separate the shaft from the grain. In this way, you can hold your personal empowerment while expanding into the exciting but often confusing territories of the angelic human spirit. Genuine Christos teachings do not teach us to crawl on our bellies like snakes before some glorified snake charmer. The Christos teaches us to walk upright, with divine love, dignity, grace, humility, respect, reverence, and power, as the living examples of the Christos manifest that angelic humans were intended to be. When you encounter traditional and contemporary anti-Christos counter movements that are routinely and inevitably set against the Founders Emerald Covenant inner Christos teachings, you might first want to consider the source and its intrinsic motivation before forming a final opinion. A few valuable questions to ask are these. Who does this information source appear to be? What are they telling me? Do they really know what they're talking about? Are they saying what they really mean? Where might their information be coming from? What motive might they have for telling me this thing? What are they hoping I believe? Why would they want me to believe this thing? What are they trying to motivate me to do with my personal power? Discover and embrace it within myself, or surrender it elsewhere in worship or obedient subservience? If they are trying to help me, what are they trying to help me achieve? And how could believing this thing empower me? If they are covertly trying to mislead me, how might I be harmed by believing them? Are they inspiring me to lead through my own inner spiritual power and wisdom, or are they seducing me to believe that I am personally powerless and so must blindly follow an external power source to save myself? And finally, if I believe this thing, will it assist me in becoming a more awakened, aware, loving, kind, responsible, strong, spiritually alive, intelligent, wise, compassionate, whole, and effective human being? The art of asking the right questions in all circumstances is an invaluable tool for advancing understanding of self and other awareness and of personal empowerment. The Founders encourage you to ask these questions in relation to their teachings, and when presented with the teachings, ideas, and opinions of others.
Thank you. That was quite a mouthful. Yeah. Okay, we're here till 10:30, right? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Do that now. Do that now. Yeah. Put the first one. Thank you. Okay. Anyway, I thought it was a good idea. Why am I echoing? No, let's try that again. I thought it was a good idea. Okay, do I have to change this from what setting it was on? Oh, you do, okay. How's that? That good? Okay. I thought it was a good idea to have that read verbatim as it was given to me from the transmissions off the plates, because there are a lot of subtleties that if I were just to try to explain to you our orientation to the law of one, the subtleties probably would have been lost. I hope that you can feel some of the truth that resonates through those work. Between every line, there could have been 20 more, but I don't think there needs to be. We call these the freedom teachings because they are designed, as this time matrix was designed, to allow people to know the freedom of free will choice in their personal relationship with God and with Source. What's happening right now on our planet is a learning drama. If we start looking at it from the highest levels first, once we get down to the lower nitty-gritty levels, it doesn't seem so intimidating. From the higher levels, we are in the middle of a drama that has to do with the path of order and the path of chaos that is talked about in that writing. The path of chaos is the path of the phantom matrix right now in relation to our time matrix. It is not only a path of chaos in terms of what consciousness experiences, it is a path of chaos in terms of the physics upon which its matter base and its hologram are built. Because the physics of the phantom matrix are literally running a reverse mathematical program to the mathematical program of the divine blueprint that allows this hologram in our time matrix to be manifest. Nobody can ever escape God. That doesn't mean God's going to track you to the ends of the universe and drag you home. It means you never leave God in the first place. We're all taking place. All of these reality fields that we speak about and that we're going to learn about take place within Source. You could think of them as thought forms within the mind of God, but that in science terms would imply a brain, and God's beyond the brain, hard technology. We are all directly connected to Source and always will be. But as this had explained, there is a preference, and Source has a preference, to experience itself through the path of order. Because through the path of order you can retain your memory matrix, and you can know what it means. You can remember all the beings that you were, all the things that you've experienced, and you can remember that while holding full direct at-one-ment with Source. The ultimate destiny, that was called the destiny of sorrow, that is of the path of chaos, is going back to what I loosely call space dust. Space dust is holy. It is sacred. It is blessed. It is conscious. But it is not conscious in the same way as a complex being that has progressively reassembled its divine blueprint memory matrix, turned it all on, and then ascended into full expansion to Source. Because the being who ascends, as opposed to fragments, has full knowing of the significance of what it's achieved, and it can appreciate fully the experience it had in individuation, while it simultaneously knows itself as God. It's an experience that's very hard to put into linear words, because it's implying, here we go, hard to put into linear words, it's implying that once you get into full expansion, full ascension, and expand fully back into Source with your memory matrix, you have a full cognition of all the things, all the places, all the things that are taking place in the time matrix. They're all happening at the same time. So it's like when you ascend, you remember that you never left. You remember that you were always God and in full expansion with God, and this was like a little virtual reality thought form that you tuned into, and you can tune into more of them. There is so much more to the state of expansion that is called at-one-ment with Source. That got twisted into atonement in some of the teachings and some of the twisted teachings, where you've got to atone in order to get bad. Now you got in order to get back to God. No, actually you just have to at-one. You have to become expanded back into at-one-ment to know true salvation. We're our own saviors is what it comes down to. We don't need anything more than the knowledge of the fact that we are an expression of Source, and therefore every quality that we attribute to Source having, we have the ability to embody that quality in some form or another as well. Now, the information that I talked about that has been progressively being given to me as a teaching, and I have been taught to translate the information so that I could teach myself, and then it's kind of like having the privilege to have that information also implied my responsibility of caring enough to continue that information on and not just hold it for myself. The information that is stored on the CDD plates, now these are metallic objects. I've held them in my hand. There's a set of 12 of them. They are pale silver, and they weigh very little when you hold them. When you project certain frequencies through certain chakras at them, you can get them to levitate and spin. And when you hit them with just the right frequency and spin rate, they will literally project a three-dimensional hologram out and run a history record for you, or run a teaching matrix for you. There are various ways to use them. Now, these technologies would not be necessary in a fully Christed civilization. In a fully Christed civilization, those living memory matrices would be imbued and fully conscious within all of the beings there. But because this particular time system has had so much damage done to its divine template, to the grids where it won't hold the divine template, there are blockages in the planetary grids that do not allow certain frequencies of understanding to hold in the grids. There are blockages in the DNA templates of the life forms on this planet. The CDD plates were given at a period of time when this race re-entered the Emerald Covenant after a long period of warring with the fallen angelic legions. And warring in those days were spaceships flying through the skies, light balls flying around. It was nothing like the little wars we've seen in our recorded history or our known history here. The CDD plates were given to a certain group of the human races that had the commission of being planetary Templar guardians. They were the ones that were going to run the planetary Templar, the stargates, the energy systems, and protect them. And they were commissioned with teaching the other races that had become lost on the planet, teaching them of the Founders' original teachings, and that's why they were given the plate. I think by reading this through, you will, and these pages here it's kind of like a capsulization of some of the early front matter in your Templar books. This particular format isn't in the books yet because I just did this so I could put it up on the board and address it. The CDD plates have a huge significance to every religion on this planet. And I wanted to share with you the history of these. Before we get into, okay, what are the teachings that were on them, I want you to understand the significance of the plates themselves and how they have had a direct and dramatic impact on the history that we know, even the history that we know. So we'll start with here. Okay, the Azurite Temple MC books, MC Melchizedek Cloister books, are translations of the ancient Cloister Duratura plate libraries, or CDD plates. The CDD plates are a set of 12 silver metallic holographic recording, data storage, and transmission devices containing the original Emerald Covenant Founders Race teachings, which were provided to inhabitants of our time matrix by the Christos Founders Breno Rishi races, which we'll find out about later, upon their original seeding of this time matrix, 950 billion years ago, linear time translation. Now, this time matrix, what that says is this time matrix was last seeded 950 billion years ago in terms of linear translation of time. Okay, wait. Thank you. Okay. Now, on the plates, the Founders' teachings were given 950 billion years ago. The plates hold record of that, but the plates were not given 950 billion years ago. All right. Now, the CDD plate libraries that this information now is being drawn from were of 246,000 BC. They were created by the Azurite, Maharaji, and Terran priests of Ur. They are Christos races of the Council of Azurline, Universal Stargate 6, Sirius B. Now you learn where the rest of the 12 primary stargates are too. You just learn where Universal Stargate 6 is. It's the Sirius B stargate. The Maharaji races have been a part of our history for eons. In fact, they were a course of evolution that one branch of humanity took before it ended up on planet Earth, when it was still on Terra in density 2, which is Earth's counterpart planet in density 2. Okay, the CDD plates were presented as a gift to the angelic human cloister races of Earth in celebration of Earth's re-entry into the Christos Founders Emerald Covenant Coevolution Peace Treaty. Now, the human cloister races, the angelic human cloister races, as we get through some of the history, we will begin to understand some of the races that we have evolved through that are existing now on Earth in the other time periods. We have Palladia cloisters, we have Urtite cloisters. These are part of the third seeding that I talked about. There were other races that were part of the first and second seeding. The cloister races were the Breatharian races that had the integrity of their DNA templates intact. By the time of this particular event of the CDD plates being given, the cloister races still, even though there had been many eons of war, even in the third seeding, they still had retained their Breatharian ability. Shortly after this, well, shortly is a relative term, there was an event that took place that changed the nature of the genetic code of the cloister race humans in order to live on this planet, because something happened to the planet. There had to be a genetic alteration done that would allow us to be able to survive on the planet, because we couldn't be breatharians here anymore. Breatharians couldn't pull enough frequency into their fields to maintain their biofields. Now, the CDD plate libraries were given by those races, the Azarites, Maharaji, and Terran priests of Ur from density 2, on behalf of the founders races, the Christos founder races of density 4, and the Brenna-Rishi races of density 5, which are in the primal light fields. The human race was created as the Templar, Stargate Complex, guardian race of this time matrix 560 million years ago. Humanity is the race originally inhabited, who lived in it, by Janus, ascended masters' souls, the race that was created by Source God and the Christos founders races to carry forward the universal Templar Security Team commission of upholding the integrity of the universal divine Christos blueprint, a commission that was originally held by the Lyran, Siran, Azarite guardian races. Now, as we move through the text of this book, we will come to understand who the Azarites are as well. They existed before the human imprint was created, and they were the original guardians of this time matrix, a race that was created in order to be able to move through the densities to protect and assist in the healing of, when necessary, the Stargate complexes on the planetary, galactic, and universal level. So humans were created 560 million years ago to take over this commission. A new wave of Ascended Master Janus consciousness was going to come in with a body form that was designed to be more tolerant of the carbon-based systems of the lower dimensional fields, because the Azarite body form was more geared toward the higher dimensional fields that are more silica-based. So they couldn't live for very long on a density 1 planet. So because there were problems happening in all of the lower densities with the fallen angelic collectives, the human collective, the human imprint, was created that had more flexibility than the Azarites did, so they could enter the, let's say, war zones of the lower dimensional fields and not have their bodies deteriorate because of it. Okay? Throughout a long history of war and conflict initiated by the Antichristos fallen angelic races, the angelic human cloister races of 246,000 BC Earth had once again temporarily freed Earth's Templar from abusive fallen angelic control. The angelic human cloister races, which are the predecessors of the Indigo children, led remaining Earth races into the Christos Founders Emerald Covenant Coevolution Peace Treaty, through which Earth's planetary divine blueprint, the original D12 pre-matter template, that's what that means, divine blueprint, was intended to be restored in order to permanently set Earth, its inhabitants, and this time matrix free from fallen angelic manipulation, exploitation, and imprisonment. The Emerald Covenant CDD plates of 246,000 BC were given to the cloister race human 12 tribes, 144,000 people, 12 tribes of 12,000, who served as the Templar security team on Earth, the Stargate security team, to replace the older CDD plate libraries that had been destroyed during the earlier periods of fallen angelic invasion and dominion of Earth. So there had been other sets of CDD plates, but most of them had fallen into the hands of fallen angelics, and they would try to get the knowledge off them and use it, in anti-Christos ways. So the founders would usually deactivate the plates, so you literally like erase the memory bank so they couldn't be used. Once that happened, they were no good. So another set had to be made if they were going to be reintroduced on a planet. Okay. The Emerald Covenant CDD plates hold the Janus Ascended Masters, which are beyond the time matrix, the 15-dimensional time matrix beyond that, and the Christos founder races, D12 through 15, original teachings on sacred spirituality, divine science, and Masters Universal Templar mechanics, as well as the signet maps and keys to the universal, galactic, and planetary stargates, and a complete history record of this time matrix since its creation point 950 billion years ago, including record of future history, simultaneous time probability fields, and the future evolution of present races. Now, the future is happening now. What we do with ourselves individually and collectively will determine which future probability we will see. We have to basically, if you want it in real simple terms, line up our vibrational frequency with the vibrational frequency of the reality field in the future that we want to be a part of. That's what we're doing on a planetary level with the grid work that we're doing. And that's what we're doing on a personal level when we realign our own divine blueprint. We're getting ourselves back into the cycles of time that lead us into, from what we call present, to the future place in space-time that is part of the divine blueprint as well. If we are functioning with distortions in our divine blueprint down here, that will take us into a probability that is not the full divine blueprint of the intended evolutionary destiny of a race or a planet. So we literally have all these other futures. All these futures are happening right now. And what we do personally and collectively as a whole on the planet will determine which one we are going to see, which particular hologram we are going to see as our linear progression. Okay, let's see. The CDD plate records were created to assist the angelic human races of Earth in re-educating other evolving races on Earth and in this time matrix about the path of true ascension, the divine blueprint, the universal Christos, the personal inner Christos, the law of one, and the loving source God from which all existence emerges. The technological, divine creation physics mechanics knowledge of the CDD plate teachings was provided to the Emerald Covenant Angelic Human Guardian races of Earth to assist them in fulfilling their chosen and Source God appointed role as guardians and keepers of the sacred Templar in this time matrix. Now, if we weren't given the divine science teachings, the technology as well, as far as how stargates operate and how all of this operates, we wouldn't be competent guardians of the Templar complexes. You have to know how it works to be able to tell if anything's going wrong with it. You have to know how to fix it if it is. So the reason why, there's a lot of twisted teachings that have come out in the last 25,000 years that have told us we had no right to that knowledge. Only God should know that. That information was given to us by God so that we could more fully allow the divine blueprint and God's will to express here and to keep that alive and to keep the integrity of this time matrix. This knowledge was given to the human races upon their creation so they could fulfill the job they were created to do. So we have a right to the knowledge. CDD plates, signet shields, and the Mahabharata text. This is where it starts to get interesting. The 12 CDD plate recorder discs also served as primal current receivers and transmitters and worked in conjunction with a related divine Templar technology called the signet shields. The word signet refers to Stargate. The signet shields were a set of 12 larger silver discs. They resemble hubcaps. I've seen one of them. That, when activated, provided the angelic human guardian races with the ability to manually direct the function of Earth's 12 primary stargates and related interdimensional time portal and dimensional lock systems. So you have a set of 12 CDD plates that hold a bunch of information, but they also are devices that have the ability to receive and transmit interdimensional current from the highest levels of the primal light fields and the primal sound fields. When those discs are used with the larger discs that are called shields, and they actually expand in size. The shields look like about a hubcap, and they're kind of like donut-like, and with a little dip in the center. I've seen one of them. When you put a disc for a plate into the shield and activate the disc, it will activate the shield. Now the shields, when they are used properly, have the ability to open and close the planetary stargates. This technology was given to us as the guardians of this planet so that we would be able to control the opening and closing, because ideally what was intended here was to be able to keep the stargates open, because when you do that you have perpetual free energy. It's called an ascension planet, where you continually have the D12 primal life force frequencies moving through the planetary grids. So you have free energy systems and you don't have healing issues on planets like that. And fully, when the stargates are fully opened, that implies the planetary grids are fully functional, which implies the planet is in its divine Christos state, which implies it's more like a reality field to go have fun with. You don't have issues of pain and suffering and wars and all of those things that come with grid distortions. So these technologies exist, and a set of the signet shields was given to the human races along with the 12 CDD plate discs. Now, it's interesting as we go through, we'll find out where they all ended up, because they're still with us. They're still on planet. All right, so the signet shields were a set of 12 larger silver discs resembling hubcaps that, when activated, provided angelic human guardian races with the ability to manually direct the function of Earth's 12 Harmony stargates and related portal systems. The 12 CDD plates served as activators for the 12 signet shields. Each signet shield CDD plate set was encoded with the mathematical activation programs of one of the 12 primary stargates in Earth Templar. The 12 tribe angelic human cloister races of Earth were appointed by Source God to serve as Templar guardians and keepers of the signet shields and CDD plate discs. Now, the 12 tribes, each of the 12 tribes was appointed custodian over one of the 12 CDD plate shield sets and one of the stargates. So you had 12 tribes of humans on the planet, and each of them had in their DNA coding that matched the particular stargate of one of the 12 on the planet that it was keyed to. So tribe 1 was keyed to stargate 1, tribe 2 to stargate 2, etc. The first externally written translation of the new CDD plates, the new ones referring to the 246,000 BC ones, the first externally written translation was created in 246,000 BC, right after they were given, by the Urtite cloister human race Templar guardians. The resultant collection of large books were called the Sacred Maharata, which means Inner Christos texts. The Maharata texts existed as a set of 590 condensed text volumes, totaling over 500,000 pages. The Maharata text books, CDD plate translations, were handwritten on semi-translucent vellum textile paper pages. It was a technology they had back then. You know how they tell us when paper was invented here? Well, that was the last time it was invented here. Because there were technology, if you have CDD plates, paper is not going to be a problem. But it was a different type of paper than anything we have here. I've seen, these books still exist, and that they were one of the things that I was allowed to spend some time with when I was taken to Inner Earth. And they're awesome. The books are huge. Well, the people were bigger then, too. The people are like, 12 feet tall, 7 to 12 feet tall, so their books were kind of bigger, their hands were bigger and things. But these volumes still exist, the original set of them that was made in 246,000 BC. Okay? Okay, they were handwritten on semi-translucent vellum textile paper pages in the original Anahazi language. The Anahazi language was the Elohai Elohim Anahazi language. They were the Christos founders races from density 4 and 5, okay? It was the first external language in our time matrix. So it was the original language out of which every other language in this whole time matrix came. So this is the language, the Anahazi language is the language that the original translations of the Maharata texts were written in. Right now, most of us would have had a very hard time reading those texts because right now our DNA is blocked in a way that we can't even synthesize some of the sounds, not to mention remember the alphabet. When we work with the technologies that are in both Cathara healing and in this Templar course, there are certain sounds and certain songs and things that we use that are in the original Anahazi language, the portions of it that we are capable of actually speaking right now. Before we leave tonight, I would like to do one song that for people who took the Cathara workshop, you'll probably remember. It's the song Alira. It's the Christos invocation song, and it brings a burst of your own D12 frequency down, and it just affects me like nothing I've ever felt. We will sing that, and that will be an example of the Anahazi language. Just a tiny example. But these texts, these 590 huge books with over 500,000 pages collectively, are in the Anahazi language. The vellum pages were assembled into large format, leather-bound volumes. Oh, they use leather. Oh dear, does that mean they kill animals? I can see the question in a lot of people's mind. There was a difference in what happened back then in relation to animals and what happens now. What we do now in our societies is we kill animals. There's not an agreement made on a conscious level. Fortunately, the animals know that there's an agreement made on the soul levels, that they're allowing themselves to be persecuted the way we are doing it here in our societies. Back then, humans and animals understood each other. When an animal consciousness was ready to leave, it would make an agreement, and particularly with the human races who had the ability to telepathically communicate with animals and plants and things. There would be agreements made. And literally, in those days, there wasn't even the thrill of the hunt. Right? Now, like, there are still native cultures that have managed the ability to, okay, we need something, we're going to hunt. Whoever's ready, you know, let's play the game, and they'll go hunting. That's what's now. Like even in the Native American cultures, they still have that. But back then, it wasn't even that. Animals would lay down, and they would appreciate the fact that the angelic humans were there, because the angelic human energy field was like a set of stairs, the stairway to heaven. The angelic human field held frequencies that, if the consciousness passed out of density 1 in the presence of an angelic human, they would be able to ride those extra frequencies up so they could accelerate their evolution and go into density 2 without having to come back down into density 1 cycles. So there was an understanding where literally, when things were ready to die, they frequently came and laid at the feet of humans so they could be near them, so they could have an exchange. What was left of the animal body would sometimes be used, sometimes simply be transmuted. In those days, the angelic humans didn't have to use knives and things. They had technologies where they could direct frequency that makes laser technology now look infantile. When it came to processing things like leather to make these books, it was a process that was done through transmutation to get the pelt off the bone. It wasn't as bloody and messy as it is now. But these leather books were, I've seen them, and they're like about this big, and they're huge. They're like, you know, so thick you can't put your hand around them. The leather on these is still the original leather, 246,000 BC. That's old leather. There's not a crack in it. It's as supple as it was when it was first put on. There were qualities that were retained in the body forms and what was left after the animals left because of the agreements they had with the humans. The animals ascended, so it left certain types of chemical compositions within the body that wouldn't have been there if they had died any other way. That created almost like the leather is still alive. It still carries a part of the animal with it, and the animal finds, wherever it has evolved to, finds a great reverence for the fact that it knows a part of itself is holding literally within its skin the divine teachings of the Maharata. So there was a whole spiritual agreement taking place between the animals involved with this. I wanted to explain that because I know people that are, you know, that are into the vegetarian movement especially might go, oh, leather books, you know. Okay, all right. All right, they were assembled into large format leather-bound volumes through a hand-rendered binding process that's akin to contemporary perfect binding. That's like the books you see, you know, in the stores where they have, you know, the paste and then the thing over the thing, like the Voyager's books. That's a perfect binding. They call that in the printing industry. So they looked like those kind of books, but they were all hand-done. They didn't have machinery that they did them with. For the next. The Maharata texts and 10 of the 12 CDD plates were retrieved by the Cirrus B Azurite races of the Azurite Universal Templar Security Team just prior to decimation of the Urtite Cloister human races of Earth, when Earth suffered fallen angelic, Nephilim Draconian, race invasion, and a resultant pole shift during the Stargate opening cycle Temple Wars of 208,216 BC. That was another stellar activation cycle when the gates were opening and we were attacked. But that time, the planet was attacked by draconian races, which were out of the fallen Seraphim, as opposed to the Anunnaki, who were out of the fallen Anu Elohim. During that period, there's a whole section in one of we're doing a new book this year that's called the Forbidden Testaments of Revelation, where we give the detail on the history. And there's a part of that history that's called the Fall of Brenoe that has to do with the area called Sarasota, Florida, because that's where the main action took place. All right, this fall of Brenoe took place in this 208,216 BC period. Following the Temple Wars and the pole shift that resulted from those Temple Wars during the stellar activation cycle, the 10 salvaged CDD plates were temporarily returned to the Angelic Human Grail Line resettlement team in 208,216 BC. So literally, they took them off planet while the chaos was happening. Once it stopped rolling, basically, the plates and shields were given back to the humans that were put back on the planet so they could restabilize the grids using the signet and shield, the signet and plate technologies. Okay. The 10 CDD plates were then returned to the Azurite protective custody. So they were taken back on planet temporarily to stabilize the grids as best as could be done, and they were taken back off the planet. Right, the original 590 volumes of the Mahabharata text from 246,000 BC were held in protective custody by the inner earth Yanni races after this cataclysm. So since that time, these books have been preserved in the inner earth civilizations. We'll talk about inner earth as we move through the Templar program, but it's a very real place. It's much nicer than here, but it's not perfect either. But that's where those books are being held still. Fallen angelic races have sought possession of the CDD plates and the signet shields since their creation, in hope of using these technologies to gain full Antichristos control over its halls of Amente stargates and the Universal Templar of this time matrix. All 12 signet shields and CDD plates 11 and 12 were captured by fallen angelic forces in 208,216 BC. So they got the 12 shields and they got 2 of the activator plates. The historical quest for control over Earth's Templar and the battle between light and darkness began, casting Earth and its inhabitants into a long evolutionary dark cycle of fallen angelic war, manipulation, deception, and attempted one world order Antichristos dominion. So this literally began 208,216 BC, or should I say the last round of it anyway, the one we have to deal with first. Because literally, there is a history that goes back to 250 billion years ago, as far as the vibrational lines of time in linear translation, where these wars have been continual in different systems, and it eventually made its way down here. It's very sad, but there's also huge amounts of things being learned as well, and that's why it's allowed. It's also been an expression of free will, and if you were to stop full expression of that, if the negatives, let's say, didn't have the right to express, it would imply that the positives could not. In order to have a joyful matrix, you have to have free will, and in order to have free will, you have to have the option of chaos as opposed to order. So that's how this is all coming to be. All right, now, planetary Christos realignment and the CDD plate speakers. Since the fall of 208,216 BC, the Urtite Cloister angelic human Templar guardian races of Earth repeatedly incarnated on Earth as the Emerald Covenant Indigo Child, Christos Grail line, progressively suffering persecution and dominion by fallen angelic presence in order to protect Earth's Templar and keep alive the Christos founder's objective of setting Earth free through fulfillment of the Planetary Christos Realignment Mission. The Planetary Christos Realignment Mission is resetting the D12 pre-matter planetary divine blueprint template back in to Earth's template. And we'll explain more of what that means as we go through the anatomy of the planetary grids. Right? Even after Earth fell to nearly complete fallen angelic dominion in 25,500 BC Atlantis, which we will talk about in the text, the angelic human Grail line races, Janus Ascended Masters, Christos Founders races, Azerite Universal Templar Security Team, and the many Emerald Covenant Christos races in this time matrix have worked toward fulfillment of the Planetary Christos Realignment Mission so they could set Earth free. Now, they have not given up. This has been ongoing in every cycle of time since that time. Nobody's given up on us down here. This is how hard a job it was. If it was so easy that you could just say, oh, I think so I am, and I think I don't want this to be anymore, so it won't be, like we're often told to do with the New Age teachings that are coming out, and they're only part teachings. They're not teaching you the mechanics of how this works and why just because you want something to happen right now, it often doesn't. This was a lot of work, and there was a lot of commitment by a lot of races, including the human races and the indigo children human races, to get us to the point where we are right now, today. Okay? At various times since 208,216 BC, Grail line humans secured the stolen CDD plates 11 and 12, only to have them stolen again by Illuminati human representatives of fallen angelic legions. Illuminati, ooh, what's that word? Okay, we have fallen angelics here. Are they the Illuminati? No. Illuminati are human, or at least they are on the outside. As we get into the course, we will learn about the Illuminati races, where they basically started on Earth, and we'll learn about something called the Leviathan Force that has to do with the tribes of Levi and what came out of that. So we'll just kind of leave that one there. Human Illuminati representatives of fallen angelic legions would continually find out where the plates were and raid the angelic groups and steal the plates back again because they wanted the knowledge that was on the plates, particularly plate 11 and plate 12. Each plate had a progressive amount of sophistication of data. Plate 12 had the most. It contained the stuff that plate 1 had and everything else, and it had the information that was coming from the primal light fields as well. So if you could access plate 12, you could literally have the library of the universe open to you. Fortunately, the fallen angelics couldn't use plate 12, but what they wanted, because they can't access D12 Christos current in their biofields, but they could use plate 11. They wanted to get plate 12 out of circulation because it could override plate 11, and then they wanted to use plate 11, gain the knowledge from it, and literally use the plate and the Signet Shields technology to take over the planetary Templar. Okay. Here's where history gets really interesting. And this is something Archangel Michael won't tell you. You know, it's like, this is why I wish those people just came. Let them hate me, but if they just came, just to find out, why could we ever take such a horrible stand against somebody as wonderful as Archangel Michael? I mean, they could at least come to find out. I wish they did. When you start, this is just a touch of the history of the CDD plates. We get into the whole history of how this evolved, and this CDD plates plug right into the history that we'll talk about later. Numerous book translations of portions of the CDD plate Mahabharata texts were made in various earthly languages throughout history since 208,216 BC. They were made by Grail Line humans that were appointed by the Janus and Christos founders to serve as Emerald Covenant speakers. Most CDD plate Mahabharata text translation met with compromise or destruction at the hands of controlling Illuminati collectives shortly after they were rendered. So they would try to bring at least part of the teachings back, you know, to the angelic human races, and the Illuminati presence under the direction of the fallen angelics had grown so strong on the planet that they would be raided every time they tried to bring the teachings back. In each time period selected by the Christos founders races for dispensation of CDD plate knowledge, 3 Emerald Covenant speakers were chosen. Only 3, because it was a security thing. There'd be only 3, so and they would all back each other up. So mistranslations, because as soon as the stuff got out there and the Illuminati got a hold of it, they twist it and use parts of it to control people. So there would be the 3 speakers that would bring it through. They'd all agree with each other, and they were all part, really, of the same soul commission. They would work together. So in each time period selected, there would be 3 Emerald Covenant speakers were chosen to render the translation of the entrusted CDD plates, like whichever plates they gave to be translated at the time. The 3 speakers would be given those plates, and they would each be assigned part of the translation. Following contamination of CDD plate teachings within the corrupt Atlantean priest caste of 25,500 BC, another translation was intended to be dispensed in preparation for the 22,326 BC Stargate opening cycle. Thoth, the Paracletes, and the Luciferian agenda. In 22,340 BC, a Nibiruan Anunnaki of the Enki Zephelium Zeta family, who had been previously leading the fallen angelic Anu Seraphim Anunnaki races into the Emerald Covenant on a Christos Founders Bioregenesis Program redemption contract, had been entrusted by the founders to serve as Speaker 3 in CDD plate translation. This individual betrayed the Christos agenda and founders, breaking the Emerald Covenant and stealing CDD plate 11 in favor of supporting the Luciferian Anunnaki anti-Christos world dominion agenda. The individual's name is Thoth. Thoth, we will get into a bit in the history, and if we don't get to cover it in depth, it is in the writings of the book. Thoth became what was known as an immortal. He almost became Christed, which was an amazing thing for an Anunnaki to do because they were a fallen matrix to begin with. He had almost stood as the example of what an Anunnaki could become when it got its Christos pattern back. He had 11.5 strand activation, which gave him an immortal body. And he made some really bad decisions. It had to do with politics that were taking place on Nibiru and in various other places during this time. But, and we'll get into that as we go through the history later, but Thoth in relation to the CDD plates is important because we start to understand where certain things that we're hearing about in the New Age movement have come from. Okay. Thoth extracted what Templar mechanics he could translate from stolen CDD plate 11 to create the Emerald Tablets, originally an anti-Christic grid mechanics text utilizing intentionally distorted translations of CDD plate 11. Thoth presented Emerald Tablet texts to to select members of the corrupted Atlantean Illuminati priest caste to assist them in supporting Nibiru and Anunnaki invasion of Earth during the 22,000, that's, I have those numbers backwards, 22,326 BC Stargate opening cycle. The administrative level of Thoth's Luciferian agenda Illuminati were called the Paracletes of Atlantis, and they're back. There's a movement of them in Europe someplace, and they call themselves that, but they don't tell you the whole history. Okay? The Nibiruan loyal Atlantean Illuminati, who thereafter propagated one Luciferian-style rendition of Templar Quest checkerboard matrix teachings. We'll learn about the checkerboard matrix, what it is, how it works in the planetary grids and in our DNA, and that's what's keeping us trapped in mortal bodies. Now, the checkerboard matrix teachings initiated by Thoth and the Paracletes are the reverse Merkaba, Antichristos, energy vampiring false ascension mechanics of the Nibiruan branch of the Alpha Omega Order Templar Melchizedeks. Alpha Omega Order equals Anunnaki Melchizedeks. Okay? Now, sometimes they were good guys. When they were honoring Emerald Covenant and trying to help their races get back the Christos pattern, they worked with the founders' races. And then there were other times when they go off on their tangents and decide, no, they wanted to control things. When they didn't get their way with the founders, if they were trying to hurt something else, and the founders said, no, you can't do that, there's a better solution. There is certain things about the Anunnaki races that had to do with the need for redeveloping some spiritual understandings that they had lost a long time before as far as inflicting their will on other things. So anyway, the checkerboard matrix teachings were the energy vampire and false ascension mechanics that are presently, unfortunately, being practiced by the Alpha Omega Order Templar Melchizedeks. That's why we call ourselves the Melchizedek Cloister, which we have always called ourselves. The cloister, and those who do not use, they just say Melchizedek priesthood. If you hear somebody say Melchizedek priesthood, most of the time, it's either somebody who doesn't have all their information down to know they're part of the cloister yet or what that means, or most likely, they are unknowingly working the Anunnaki and the Christos agenda, and they don't know that because they're being manipulated. Most people that call themselves Melchizedeks are channels. Most are being taught by Thoth. A few others are running around there too with, with different names. All right, so until November 1999 AD, stolen CDD Plate 11 remained in Paraclete descent family lines, which became part of the larger Illuminati family lineage known as the Knights Templar and later as the Freemasons. They were reclaimed in 1999, and they couldn't release any information to me on these plates until that last one was secured. In the 1600s, the other one had been recovered. Plate 12 had been recovered. All right, so finally, in November 1999, we could finally get transmission on the plates about the plates. Because I knew the things, I knew what they were, but I couldn't access how to explain this. What are these things? I know they're important. They're holding all this information. All of the information on the plates came through after that one was secured. So they, because it was really, there's been security mission going on here the whole time in this particular time frame. Now, the invasion of Earth and claiming of the halls of Amente stargates that was intended by the Nibiru and Anunnaki races in 22,326 BC ended in a partial pole shift and a stalemate. A stalemate the Anunnaki intended to resolve to their favor through a final conflict battle scheduled for the next 2000 AD to 2017 AD Stargate opening cycle. They knew way back then that this was the next time the gates would open, and they were planning to stage the final conflict drama to get control of the Halls of Amente stargates. Christos founders' historical attempts at returning CDD plate teachings. You're going to love this. This is going to tell you some really neat stuff. Desecration of one sacred, Buddhaic, Semitic, Sumerian, Egyptian, Celtic, Druidic, and Hindu texts. Numerous other attempts of CDD plate translation were commissioned by the Christos founders' races in various time periods and cultures, setting the foundations of what were the original global Christos teachings that were once part of all true sacred earth religions. In 10,000 BC, CDD plate translations were attempted within the Chinese and Tibetan Yu-Grail lines, which became the foundations of the original Buddhaic teachings. Progressive invasion by Illuminati factions within the pre-Mongolian raider races brought a variety of falsified Buddhaic religious control dogmas and omission of the Christos ascension mechanics within the once sacred Eastern mystical traditions. In the 9558 BC fall of Atlantis, which we talk about in the history, fallen angelic Palladian Nibiruan Anunnaki races waged a planetary house cleaning, confiscating as much historical evidence of the CDD plate records, Christos mission, and ancient human 12-tribe cultures as they could find. Why can't we find more stuff? Because they took it. They took it on purpose because there was an agenda. It was part of something called the Luciferian Covenant and the Atlantean Conspiracy. We are living the end version of the Atlantean Conspiracy right now. So we'll talk about that when we get into the history. We'll talk about that more. In 8900 BC, CDD plate translations were attempted within the Hebrew Grail lines of Sumerian Ur, only to be rapidly confiscated or distorted into Sumerian and Babylonian false creator god control dogmas by Jehovian, Sirius A Anunnaki, and competing Hybiru Draconian Illuminati Dominion forces. Portions of the Sumerian CDD plate teachings were distorted and combined with other distorted Semitic text control dogmas that first emerged in Atlantis from distortions of CDD plate Hebrew Grail line texts. The combined distortions became the foundations of the falsified pre-Torah and Kabbalah Semitic texts from which later sects of Jewish faith mass control dogmas emerged. So the Jewish people had their original sacred teachings compromised there. In 8400 BC, CDD plate translations were attempted among the pre-dynastic Atlantean descent Saras Egyptian Grail line of Egypt, which set the foundations for pre-Pharaonic Egyptian sacred Christos mystical teachings. Select Egyptian CDD plate texts were rapidly confiscated and distorted by competing Egyptian Illuminati forces, serving as the foundations of falsified Egyptian creator god myths, upon which the Illuminati-run Pharaonic dynasty cultural dominion structures were later ordered. So the whole Pharaonic dynasty, everybody goes to Egypt and goes, oh wow, isn't that wonderful? Maybe I was a pharaoh. Hope you weren't. Yeah. The Grail line races, human races, had a rough time during that period because you had Illuminati. The whole Pharaonic setup was an Illuminati construct that was directly part of the Atlantean conspiracy agenda, and they were directly connected to the Atlantean tribes that had moved on after the fall of Atlantis, which was the fall of Atlantis with the big flood, was contrived. It was made to look like something more than what it actually was. There was a flood, but it wasn't as big as they made it out to be. So the Pharaonic dynasties were not part of the divine blueprint. They were not part of the Christos culture. They were part of Nibiruan culture. It was their structure. The pyramids came before that. So actually, the original pyramids existed before you had pharaohs. So they weren't created as burial tombs for pharaohs, because there weren't pharaohs yet. The ancient pyramids, there are various times when the pyramids at Giza had been knocked down and built back up again, knocked down, built back up again. But there are, if you want to know more about that period, that's covered in Voyagers Volume 2. So, it gets into that. I'm not going to get into that too much in the history here, because that's kind of like interesting stuff, but there's more important stuff to deal with as far as the Templar course goes, but it is there. The information's available on it. Okay. So that was in 8400 BC. In 7500 BC, CDD plate translations were attempted among the original Celtic. They were called Celtics. Okay, Celtic Grail lines of what became Ireland, England, and Scotland, which set the foundations for the original Celtic Druidic Christed Earth spirituality texts and oral traditions. The original Celtic Druidic traditions, again, were later distorted by various Illuminati legions into antichristic earth elemental occult control dogmas that would call upon the forces of darkness in order to make stuff happen, and that was not the original Celtic Druidic teachings. In 5900 BC, another CDD plate translation was attempted among the Ramavida Grail line races of India, setting the foundations for what later became the Hindu religion, which was systematically corrupted via Illuminati editing and addition of false history, distorted karma mechanics, and female subjugation. Okay, you're getting an idea here of what our evolution has been about, and this is it's kind of like it's hard to address what has happened in our culture, yet at the same time it's redeeming. Because there's been a part of most people that says, okay, well, that's a holy book. Okay, I resonate with that part, and I want to be good where God's concerned, but does God really get that mad? Fire and brimstone, those kind of things. If you're a Muslim, does God really want me to do jihad? Am I really supposed to do holy war? There's always been these parts of the teachings that almost felt like they contradicted other parts. And this has been through all of the texts. You know, people wonder, where did these texts come from in the first place? They came from translations of the CDD plates, the founder CDD plates. All of the world religions were at one point holy, and they were corrupted from that point. Okay, in 4700 BC, yet another CDD plate translation attempt was launched among the original Mua Inca Grail lines of Machu Picchu and Lake Titicaca, Peru, and among the original Mua Gray Line races of what is now Kauai, Hawaii, and Easter Island, setting the foundations of what became the original Christos Kahuna, shamanistic spiritual teachings. Possession of CDD plate records brought Illuminati invasion of the original Inca and Mua races, culminating in persecution and near destruction of their Grail lines, and progressive distortion of the original common Christos Kahuna oral traditions into a variety of competing, antichristic, pseudo-shamanistic tribal control dogmas. In 3700 BC, CDD plate translation began among the original Maya Grail lines, culminating in their invasion and racial corruption by Thoth's and Iberio and Anunnaki-directed Illuminati forces in 3650 BC. That's where they even slip up in a little bit of the Thothian history they let out. They talk about how Thoth went over to the Mayas and taught them things. You could say that Thoth invaded the Mayas and forced them to learn things. You know, it's funny because I have, on my 3D level self here this time around, I have no grudge with Thoth at all. It's just a person that's a name, just like anybody else down here tends to relate to it. A person that was a name, maybe it was a person, maybe it wasn't. But then when I go back to my movies that I had since I came into this body, and I remember me and the other me's that exist out there, I knew this person in an event that was called the Iani Massacre in that 22,326 BC period when Thoth turned on us. I was there, Az was there, and a whole bunch of other of us that ended up going to Kauai for this healing, for this workshop, were there. And he's real. Thoth is a real being. And it's kind of interesting when you start to realize that there's probably parts of you that were part of these dramas as well. It starts to mean more than just names or words from the ancient past on a piece of paper, because you start to have personal memory of what was taking place. And hate to disappoint people, but you know how certain Melchizedek traditions are saying how Thoth is this little, like, older guy type thing? Well, he only appears to men that way usually, because men will respect that image as an older, elder male person that they might listen to, particularly people who are affiliated with Anunnaki. When he appears to women, he tends to, he has long black hair, shiny, he has kind of tannish skin and a quite handsome face, but with a kind of a pronounced classic Anunnaki nose. And he kind of presents himself strutting his stuff as if he's Mr. Gorgeous. So it depends on what Thoth's interest is in you, whether or not you'll have contact, and how he'll present himself to you. So, you know, if you tend to, you know, respect older male figures, you'll get one of those. If you tend to just, I don't think he appears to men. I've never heard a case where he appeared to men as his younger version. But he controls. He's in an immortal body, a semi-immortal body. He can't ascend all the way because he's stuck, but he still literally has a perpetual, you know, life frame. He and beings like him, like Enoch, they can do the same thing. But they can transpose whatever age they want by raising or lowering their frequency. They can take themselves back to being this high infants, or they can, you know, be like how they would be right before they ascended kind of forms. So they can change form to you visually, but they have a primary form that they will have depending on where they're living in the time matrix. Thoth is hanging out in density 2, which isn't that impressive, you know what I mean? Yes?
How can a being with that level of awareness be unaware of this divine connection? And still
The thing is,
follow with that kind of a passion and anti-Christo agenda?
Thoth is aware of his divine connection. And so are the Anu Elohim races that are the D11 dark avatars. They are consciously choosing not to go back into the collective. They are consciously choosing to make decisions that are really pretty dumb when you understand the whole framework. They are doing this because, and this is taking us off into something else, but there's something called code convolution that we talked about in the Cathara workshop, where after combining one set of, say, genetic codes or templates over and over and over again, creating different diversity among them, eventually the codes break down like inbreeding in the genetic code. The fallen Anu Elohim suffered inbreeding of their genetic code at the avatar level, and it created a whole matrix of avatars who understood and were brilliant, because they are brilliant as far as intellect goes. But they lost the ability to hold the D12 frequency, which means they could no longer feel the primal life force currents of the Christos, which gives you the direct connection to the law of one, to the oneness, where you can feel you're part of the whole, where you can feel that connection. So they can conceptually say, okay, we're part of the whole, and they can teach, oh, the law of one. But at the same time, they do not feel it, and they can't carry the frequency of it, so they can make decisions as if it wasn't real, as if it was just something that was conceptual. And that's how they tend to relate to it. That's why they can make decisions like they do to take an anti-Christo stand. It's a healing that needs to occur. But in Anunnaki races especially, they were created as an avenger race by the Anu Elohim to destroy the angelic human races so the Anu Elohim could get control of the time matrix. They carry an imprint within them that is distorted from the beginning, and they do not carry a Christos seed, which is the D12 spark that any angelic human race or any Christos being will actually have. When it first comes into fetal integration, it will have a D12 spark called the Christos spark. Fallen angelic races are born without it, and they can re-evolve to getting it back. But while they're without it, things like Christ consciousness and love can be intellectually understood. The mathematics can be known and played with, but the feeling of what that means, of it being real, to where you would honor it, isn't there. And that's part of the reason why Toth and some of the others are fallen. Okay, let's see. Where am I? Did you do?
Third dot down.
1, 2, 3. Okay.
Second dot down.
Yeah, second dot. Okay. In 2690 BC, CDD plate translations were attempted among the South African Grail lines, bringing Illuminati invasion and the Grail lines' attempted exile to Nubia and Egypt. 2668 BC brought further Illuminati invasion of Egypt during the Joshua period and progressive Illuminati imprisonment and extermination of Grail line members versed in CDD plate oral traditions. So after a while, the founders went into just doing it in oral tradition, so because the books and texts were getting taken, and when it was put in written form, they were getting taken and confiscated and used against people, basically. So they were just beginning to train people in oral. This is why we were speakers. We were speaking it, and it would be, literally oral tradition, and it would be encoded in your gene code, so you would have the memory. I mean, sometimes I have part of this alive in my memory now, as I have learned it through the CDD plate translation, where I can go sometimes on like a history spiel. And I amaze myself sometimes, like, gee, I didn't know I had that many megabytes available, where it just rolls, and it's just there, and I know it, and it's not channeling from here or out there. It's right there in my DNA, and I can feel it running, So the oral tradition was an attempt to try to protect the speakers and get the stuff on planet in a way that wouldn't be confiscated or misused. But it only set up a situation where they went after the speakers themselves, and they'd imprison them as scribes. In fact, the Great Pyramid was used for that very often. It was used to imprison Grail line members that had access to some of the CDD plate information. It was stored in their DNA, and they would be held there imprisoned and forced to write it down, and if they didn't write it down, they wouldn't hurt them because the Grail line members would die for it. They'd die silent. But what they would do was they would isolate the collectives they had been trying to protect, and they would tell them they would exterminate them. They'd send their armies in to exterminate them if they didn't transcribe. So sometimes they tried false transcription, which worked sometimes. So you got a lot of falsified records floating around too, where the Pharaoh is a bad guy and he wants to have this information from you, and you've got it, and he's going to kill your whole 200,000 people that you've been trying to protect. So okay, you pretend to give it to them, right? And as long as they didn't get caught, it could go on for a while. So you'd have all these books with twisted mechanics in it. Sometimes the Grail lines were twisting them on purpose to throw the other guys off the trail. Okay. Each Christos Founders Race attempt to return the Emerald Covenant CDD plate Christos freedom teachings was met with rapid fallen angelic inspired Illuminati race interference, through which Grail line races were progressively invaded and persecuted as the Templar quest raged on. Each time the majority of the texts were confiscated, edited, and distorted into controlled dogmas or destroyed entirely. Enoch and the sons of Zadok. The word Zadok comes out of an original word that was called the Kodazim, which was a race Enoch was appointed to be guardian over in the Emerald Covenant. Zadok is the reverse of that. It was a race that came out of the the Kodazim, having their DNA template set on a reverse matrix, which means taken into the Antichristos imprint. So Zadok is what the sons of Zadok are the ones who were originally the Kodazim. Now, in 2040 BC, an Arcturian descent Jehovian Anunnaki, then entrusted by the Christos founders to lead members of the Sirius A Arcturian Jehovian Anunnaki tribe of Nephi, which we'll talk about later, not tonight, into an Emerald Covenant redemption contract, served as CDD plate speaker 2. This individual's name was Enoch. Enoch translated information from several CDD plates to create 3 volumes of text: the Book of Amente, the Angelic Rosters, and there's a book, the pieces of it are surfacing now, that's called I, Enoch, and I believe it was originally found in Africa or something, like pieces of it. But the I, Enoch book is actually part of the Angelic Rosters book, and the Book of the Dragon. Now these books Enoch was working the Emerald Covenant at that point, and he was entrusted as a speaker, and he produced these books. The Book of Amente was, Voyagers Volume 2 is the beginning translation of that book, which is telling about the stargates and the race history and that. The Angelic Rosters was like the who's who in the time matrix. It identified all the matrices, the fallen angelics and the good angelics, so you could tell who was who. And the Book of the Dragon, which was a book about particularly the fallen seraphim and how they had gotten control of certain aspects of this time matrix in the Orion system, and how they were competing with the Anunnaki fallen angelics. And so there was these 3 books that were written by Enoch. In 10 AD, now it's quite a while after that, Enoch fell to pressures from the fallen angelic Anu Elohim Jehovian Anunnaki collective, breaking the Emerald Covenant in favor of joining the Templar Melchizedek Jehovian Nephite Anunnaki Antichristos World Dominion agenda. That is competing with the Toth group. The Jehovian Anunnaki and the Toth group, which are called the Anu Seraphim Anunnaki, don't like each other. The Jehovian Anunnaki were the original bipedal dolphin people of Sirius A, and they consider the other Anunnaki, the Anu Seraphim. Anu Seraphim means they were half Anunnaki, and they interbred and hybridized with the draconian or reptilian matrices. So the Jehovian Anunnaki look down their nose at them saying, you're not pure Anunnaki. So there's this thing going on between the Anunnakis. Okay, so Enoch was representing the Jehovian Anunnaki. He was trying to help some of them back into the Emerald Covenant through the tribe of Nephi, which we'll talk about later. That came out of the tribe of Levi, which was earlier. All right. He fell in 10 AD. Enoch fell, which means he made a bad choice to join the Jehovian Nephite Anunnaki Antichristos World Dominion agenda that had been promoted since 10,500 BC, where he fell the first time and crawled back up, from 10,500 BC Atlantis, by a Nephite Illuminati collective called the Sons of Zadok. Notice this little line here. I won't say too much about it, but Enoch re-entered the Emerald Covenant after he fell in 10 AD on a Christos Founders Race Redemption contract in 1983. It pays to check copyright dates on books. That's all I can say for anybody that knows of the name Enoch. Okay? We'll touch on that more later. A very loving soul. There is a love frequency that Enoch carries that is missing from the Toth group. Enoch has made bad decisions just like Toth has, but Enoch made them out of an honest to goodness sincere desire to protect what he considered his people. If he could have expanded his concept of his people to include everyone, he wouldn't have made the same choices. But there was a loyalty and a sincerity in Enoch, and right now Enoch's still part of the Emerald Covenant, but it's almost probationary because he's under a lot of pressure from the United Resistance Anunnaki legions, Archangel Michael, all those guys, to come back over. So that's Enoch anyway. And then CDD plates, the Ionian Grail line, and the fall of Rome. In 790 BC, an attempt was made to bring CDD plate translations to the Ionian Italic Grail line races of what became Rome and Paxos Island, Greece. Ionian CDD plate text translations spurred aggressive retaliation from various competing Illuminati collectives who drove Grail lines into progressive submission and persecution while confiscating CDD plate text translations to create a variety of competing religious control dogmas upon which Roman and Greek cultures were later structured. culminated in the full Illuminati invasion and subjugation of Rome between 42 BC and 26 BC. Portions of the Illuminati fallen angelic religious control dogmas became the stories presently found in Roman and Greek mythology and teachings of Thoth, Hermes, Trismegistus. I can't pronounce that right, Trismegistus. Okay. So there's Thoth, who was directly involved as Hermes Trismegistus. I can never say that right. He had literally gone from the Egyptian period. In the book that's coming out, hopefully by the end of this year, The Forbidden Testaments of Revelation, it shows you things like the progression of, where Thoth was involved with Sumeria, or Atlantis, where he was involved with Sumeria, then to Egypt, then to the Mayan cultures, then into Rome, Greece and Rome. So there's this whole progression that when you're immortal and you've achieved, even if you're working an Antichristos agenda, if you've got a body that is able to sustain for thousands and thousands of years, you can cause an awful lot of trouble. And that's what numbers of these beings have done. Okay, let's see. CDD plate translations in the Christ period. In 10 AD, the last commission for written CDD plate translation was entrusted to 3 Emerald Covenant speakers, each of the angelic human, each being of the angelic human indigo child gray line. The 3 speakers of 10 AD were Essenes, who historically became known as John the Baptist, who was from 31 BC to 34 AD, Joshua Melchizedek, who became known as Jesus, 12 BC to 27 AD, and Jeshua's half-sister Miriam, 5 BC to 37 AD. Jeshua translated 6 volumes of text from the CDD plates called the Books of Process, one of which was the Book of Maps and Keys. Miriam translated 3 volumes called the Books of the Cloister and the Book of Songs. Songs are the sacred songs that go with the DNA templates and the planetary grids that allow the activations of DNA templates and stargates to occur. Okay. The 3 intended books of John were not completed, as John was murdered prior to their completion. The 6 books of Jeshua, 3 books of Enoch, 3 books of Miriam, and intended 3 books of John are the 15 missing books of the Bible, which were intended by the Christos founders races as a new beginning translation of the original Mahabharata text from 246,000 BC. This Mahabharata text CDD plate translation was given in 10 AD to prepare humanity for the next Stargate opening cycle of 2000 AD to 2017 AD, the first since the failed cycle stalemate of 22,326 BC, and to prepare us for the final conflict battle for the dominion of the halls of Amete stargates that was intended by the fallen angelic and Illuminati legions during this coming Stargate opening cycle. So this is the history of the plates, and it tells us a lot about our own history as well, without even going into the heavier history. Progressive desecration of the once holy Bible and Koran. Following creation of the Essene CDD plate translation books, the Illuminati collectives among the Pharisees, Sadducees, and Romans began confiscation, manipulation, and destruction of the 10 AD Essene texts. By 275 AD, many Christ period texts and history records were intentionally distorted, edited, or destroyed by various competing fallen angelic Illuminati factions. And this was the icing on the cake. This was like when it took on a whole new power to really repress people. In 325 AD, the Church of Rome orchestrated another wave of their history record confiscation campaign and organized the Council of Nicaea, bringing together Pharisees, Sadducees, and various other competing Illuminati scholars from surrounding regions to contrive a common false history story and religious control dogma to further the political, economic, and world dominion agendas of the Roman Empire. They took the texts, they edited them, they contrived a story by putting bunches of them together, took out the ascension mechanics completely, twisted up the lines so you couldn't tell what, the Grail lines really even existed. And they did this to further the political objectives of Rome, which was to take over the world. Rome was being controlled by Illuminati, who were in contact with the Nibiruans, and another group of them were in contact with the Draconians. So literally, this has been an invasion every step of the way.